Pray for direction which will lead our city to be strong and unified. May we continue the legacy of our founders. May we be granted this day the wisdom to make decisions which will be for the good of our city. We also pray for your special blessing on all those who are working to transform our city and make it a better place to live and work. Amen. Would you please honor our nation's flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Council Mercia. Here. Mayor Murphy.
Here.
Council Noon.
Here.
Council Elliott.
Here.
Council Kennedy.
Here.
Council Leahy. Here. Council Laurie.
Here.
Council Martin.
Here.
Council Mendonça.
Here.
9 present.
Thank you. At this time, I recognize Council Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm requesting a moment of silence for Kenneth Corner. Kenneth passed away last week. He originally was from Lynn. He graduated from Lynn English High School, and he served his country in Vietnam and received an honorable discharge in January of 1968. After his discharge from the service, he worked throughout his career for many retail stores in the area. He belonged to the Lowell Lodge of Elks, the American Post, Knights of Columbus and Lynn, and the American Veterans for the veterans of the Vietnam War. Kenny was involved in many organizations, including St. Jude's Hospital and the Home for Little Wanderers. He was a communicator of St. Rita's Church. He's survived by his wife, Betty Jane, and his daughter, Allison. May he rest in peace.
Thank you. Councilor Mercia.
I'd like to offer a moment of silence in Docking Chamber for Arthur J. Tessie Russell, a 34-year veteran of the Lowell Police Department. He was the beloved husband of Betty. Tessie proudly served his country in the United States Army during the Korean War era until his honorable discharge. Tessie was the vice president of the Massachusetts Police Association and a member of the Mass Retirement Board, the Tewksbury Elks, and the East End Club in Lowell. Besides his wife, Betty, he also leaves behind his 3 sons, Peter, Paul, and Joseph, and his two stepchildren, Nicole and David, as well as 10 grandchildren. He always was a gentleman, and I remember that after Tessie retired, he was a security guard at the Washington Savings Bank. I observed his interaction with the customers, and he had quite a love for all of them. They respected him as well. I offer my sympathy to the family, and please know he will be truly missed. He was the best. Thank you.
Thank you. You'd please rise in a moment of silence in Docking Chambers. We have under the city clerk's portion of the agenda, minutes of the city council meeting November 20th, minutes of the environmental subcommittee November 20th, and minutes of the special meeting city council on November 27th for acceptance. Councilman Mendonça.
Yes, in the minutes of the regular meeting on November 27th on page 2, second paragraph from the bottom regarding the quarterly traffic ordinance, there was a reference to, there are 2 references here to Lane Street. In the minutes, it's currently L-A-N-E. It's actually Eline Street off of Arnhem Ave, which is E-L-E-N-E, if that could be corrected in both places in that paragraph.
Thank you. Motion to approve as amended by Councilman Mendonça, seconded by Councilor Mercia. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have a communication. Approval of the bingo application by Dr. Linda Truvell on behalf of the St. Louis School. Entertain a motion to approve.
Move approval.
By Councilor Kennedy, seconded by Councilor Laurie. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have under the city auditor's portion of the agenda, communication for free cash and non-recurring revenues. Any discussion? Motion to accept and place on file by Councilor Mendonça, seconded by Councilor Laurie. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. We have a number of people here that the manager is wishing to appoint. If we could entertain a motion then, as interested, I'm sure, as they are in the agenda, to get them out of here sooner, by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Leahy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. We'll then begin with item number 15, appointment of Patrick McCartan to the Elections Commission.
Move approval.
Move for approval by Councilor Kennedy, seconded by Councilor Elliott. Roll call, please.
Counsel Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Counsel Nun.
Yes.
Counsel Elliott.
Yes.
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy.
Yes.
Counsel Laurie.
Yes.
Counsel Martin.
Yes.
Counsel Mendonça.
Present.
8 yeas.
And Mr. McCartan is here this evening.
If he could come up to the podium.
Good evening. My name is Pat McCartan, and I'm a resident of Lowell, a lifelong resident of Lowell. I guess my main objective is to maintain the integrity of the electoral system, which is real important to our country and makes us what we are.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next, we have the appointment of Robert Malovich to the Planning Board as an
Move
associate
approval.
member. Move for approval by
Second.
Councilor Kennedy, seconded by Councilor Laurie. Roll call, please.
Counsel Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Counsel Nun.
Yes.
Counsel Elliott.
Yes.
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy.
Yes.
Counsel Laurie.
Yes.
Counsel Martin.
Yes.
Counsel Mendonça.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Mr. Manager.
If I may, and I should have done this with Mr. McCartan, I wanted to thank Mr. McCartan for we had a great opportunity to meet a couple weeks back, and I think Mr. McCartan is going to do an excellent job. He came, as he indicated in his comments, a real commitment to ensuring a fair and efficient electoral system here in the city, and I know that his commitment to the city is strong. Mr. Malovich comes to us tonight, and I'm happy to make this appointment to this position of alternate member of the Planning Board. Mr. Malovich comes with extensive background in planning, having served here in the city of Lowell going back to the early 1970, I believe it was. 69. But did an outstanding job here in the city during a time of great change in the city, and has that knowledge and that experience. So I'm happy to introduce Mr. Malovich to the City Council, who I believe everyone on the City Council knows Mr. Malovich. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the acceptance of the resignation of Robert Cronin for the Board of Trustees. Okay. To accept the resignation of Robert Cronin, Board of Trustees of the Lowell Memorial Auditorium. Councilor Mercia.
Mr. Mayor, if we could send him a letter of thanks, because he has done an outstanding job, only for the sake that he's moving out of the state. He will be missed as well.
Sure. Motion to accept and place on file by Councilor Mercia, seconded by Councilor Laurie. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have the appointment of Leo L. Cludier to the Board of Trustees of the Lowell Memorial Auditorium. Move for approval by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Kennedy. Any discussion?
Yes.
Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the city manager, what an excellent choice this gentleman is. I'm going to embarrass him a little bit because we go back a long ways. He was very instrumental in volunteering of his time and energy to the Council on Aging, to the Friends of the Council on Aging, having served as the treasurer of the Friends of the Council on Aging. whenever the call goes out for help, this gentleman is right there. He will certainly be an excellent choice, and I'm very proud of this man immensely. He's such a credit to the seniors, and he's a Franco-American War veteran, and he certainly will be a credit to the Lowell Memorial Auditorium as well. Thank you for this wise choice. Thank you.
Councilor Laurie.
Again, I want to congratulate Mr. Cloutier. He'll be representing the veterans with the auditorium. And I know Mr. Cloutier served in the submarines in the, I believe, the Second World War, and he also worked for many years, I think, at Concord Prison. In Concord?
Korean.
Yeah, at Concord Prison. And now he's coming to us, and again, just as Councilor Mauricio says, to serve the city. And I want to thank Mr. Cloutier. Thank you.
Councilor Elliott.
Thank you. Like Council Mercy, I served as president of the Friends of the Council on Aging during Mr. Cloutier's tenure as treasurer, and we started that organization, and he did a great job. But I also want to make note that Mr. Cloutier, as wonderful a person is, behind every good man is a wonderful woman, and his wife is here, and she is just as hard working as Leo, and they are a pair where you see Leo, you see his wife, and I want to congratulate you and your wife as well.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Noon.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Martin.
Yes.
Councilor Mendonça.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Mr. Manager.
Well, if I may, and it's the several councils have already indicated, Mr. Cloutier comes with a tremendous history here in the city, and with his commitment to the community and his commitment to the country, in his service in Korea in the submarines. With all due respect to all of my other appointees here tonight and all of the appointees I've made through the years, and Mr. Cloutier knows I said this to him that day. I had one of the most enjoyable interviews with Mr. Cloutier, learning about his history here in the city, in the history of the city, and it's a real pleasure for me to have the opportunity to appoint you to the Board of Trustees.
Thank you.
Sure.
A few words. It's my honor here to be here tonight and accept this position, okay? To be a member of the Board of Trustees at the Lowell Memorial Auditorium. I would gladly fill the veteran seat. I'm a veteran with honorable discharge, and as people have mentioned, I served in the Navy submarine service. I will look out for the interests of the veterans and also the great city of Lowell. I'm not alone here tonight accepting this. I have a lady here that's always been with me. She's always there with me when I need her. She's a great, great encouragement and the biggest supporter. Please meet my wife, Pauline Cloutier, my bride of 60 years. In closing, I want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, a happy, healthy New Year, and once again, thanks to all the city officials for placing their trust in me. May God bless us all, and God bless America.
Thank you, Mr. Cloutier. Next, we have the appointment of Patricia Norro for the Board of Trustees of the Library.
Move approval.
Move for approval by Councilor Kennedy, seconded by Councilor Laurie. Roll call, please.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Noon.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Martin.
Yes.
Councilor Mendonça.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Mr. Manager? Again, members of the council, Mr. Mayor, it's a pleasure for me to appoint Patricia Neuro to the Board of Trustees. As you can see by her resume, she comes with extensive experience in the operation of libraries here at the city, at the university. It was a pleasure meeting with you as well. So, but no, I want to thank you for serving, your willingness to serve on the Board of Trustees.
Thank you. Next, we have these, Councilor Kennedy.
If I could just take a minute, to the city manager, this is a very good cluster of appointments, and I just wanted to commend you on it. They're all good appointments.
Thank you, Mr. Councilor.
Thank you. Next, we have in the city manager's portion of the agenda, communication from city manager, responses to city council motions and requests. Any discussion? Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This week in the packet, I'm going through it now. There were several motions I had put in. I want to thank the departments and address the motions. I know the first one, I believe, was on Bigelow Street and changing it to, well, actually, I've got them in my hands here. Changing Bigelow Street to suburban single-family. There were some issues between the residents and the developer in that area and on the zoning. And both parties came together and they both agreed to probably, this would be the best way to go with this single suburban. And I put a motion in last week, and I want to thank Mr. Bakey and his staff for coming through very quickly with this. The second was residential parking only on Riverside Way. Excuse me, the condo association. It did come back Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., excluding holidays. And I think that's the way, after talking to Mr. Bakey, the residential parking goes, and I guess the Highlands and the Acre. My one concern with it being from 7 to 10 is the new dorms being built across the street. And the university spends a ton of money for parking for their students, for them to have off-street parking. I'm concerned that after 10 o'clock at night, they may take some of those spaces. I know the idea behind it is by 10 o'clock, most people are home and they'll have the parking. But this is fine for now, but that's something I'd like to really be watched as the dorms are built in that area, that we preserve the integrity of the neighborhood and the residents' ability to park near their homes. A third item that was brought back, and I know Councilor Kennedy put in a motion a week or two after, and that was the traffic lights at Bridge Street and the VFW. This has been an issue now for some time, and it's a state road. It's the state has the control of those lights, and I know the administration met with the delegation last week and members, I think from MassDOT. Originally, I believe that was set to be redesigned in 2013. Now it's 2014. I'm not sure the results of that meeting, but if Mr. Bakey could explain a little bit again what's going on with those lights over there. There's very little this council can do other than request the delegation. There's very little the administration can do but work with the delegation, who's been working very hard with the city to reach out to MassDOT to get those lights at least sequenced so we can move traffic along. Thank you.
Mr. Bakey.
Mr. Bakey.
Good evening. I guess I'd like to just start by thanking Senator Donahue and Representatives Golden, Angle, and Murphy for organizing an opportunity for us to talk directly with the folks from MassDOT about this with their support. In the meeting, we raised a couple of issues in reaction to the fact that the permanent improvements to that intersection are still a couple years off, as you pointed out. And that is, there are two relatively modest changes that they could make that we believe would improve or I guess make things less bad than they presently are at that intersection. Part of the problem is just the sheer volume of traffic that needs to go through that intersection. One of the two changes would be, and the one we think would actually frankly make the bigger difference, would be to change the pedestrian signal from being what's called exclusive phasing, where you push the button and traffic in all directions has to stop, and it has to stop for 40 seconds. They adjusted the timing to comply with the new requirements for how long that timing needs to be when you have an exclusive phase, and that 40-second delay reverberates through the entire system and really is fundamentally what the problem is. The alternative, which is what we are recommending, is that they look into changing the phasing so that the pedestrians are operating on what's known as concurrent phasing, which means that when the traffic has a green light in, say, the northbound direction, the pedestrians who wish to cross north-south also could cross at the same time, which is frankly what pedestrians will do regardless of how the signals are phased. So it actually causes the operation to be much more fluid and work a little bit better. MassDOT to date has rejected that proposal, saying that that is not consistent with their standard safety practices. And they, at the meeting, indicated that they would take a look again at it, but did not make a definitive commitment. The other modest improvement, which may make some difference, would be if they could look to repair the synchronization between the signal at Lakeview and the signal at Bridge on the VFW. Historically, there was a wired connection between the two that has not been functioning for some time. They have been synchronized on what's considered a time-based process that gets disrupted, again, every time someone pushes the pedestrian button at the one intersection. So the hope is that maybe they can restore the hardwired connection, which would make those disruptions less of an issue, and it would at least make the traffic flow going east and west on the VFW, particularly eastbound, through the two intersections a little bit better than it is today. Ultimately, we are all looking forward to the more significant improvements that they're going to make in a couple of years that hopefully will more substantially address the problem.
Thank you. And again, I want to thank the administration, Mr. Bakey and his department, the Lowell Police Department, and especially the Lowell delegation, the state senator and the three representatives for working with MassDOT trying to get this intersection fixed. Yesterday was over 60 degrees, so I was out on the motorcycle. And at 2 o'clock, I went down to VFW. I went past Bridge Street. And at 2 o'clock, the traffic was backed up almost to that old pump station. So whatever we can do to get that relieved, and thank you. And there was one more item that I put in a motion for, and that was on the Prince Macaroni Bridge. And again, I want to thank Mr. Bakey and his staff, Eric Eby. I know they're working with the companies that do the GPS system to at least get that on GPS and get the trucks to realize that those bridges are lower and maybe send them to different exits and maybe use Route 3 if they're going out to Billerica. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Elliott.
Thank you. I wanted to also raise the issue of the Spaghettiville Bridge. So essentially, I mean, with the exception of contacting GPS, we're not doing anything, right?
Actually, we've reached out to the MBTA to discuss the possibility to fund the installation of additional warning signs and safeguards. So we're working with them on that roadway with their ideas of ways to address that.
I mean, I just suggested put a sign up. I mean, and I don't know what studies say that it doesn't work, but I just think it's a practical, very inexpensive prevention method to let people know. I mean, if they don't know that they hit a sign, then there's something drastically wrong. If they don't see the sign and then the low-hanging bridge, then they've got to be impaired. I can understand if they're driving, they think they're going to clear it, but if you hit a sign first, it's not as if it's going to be completely silent. And the motion was really to contact the owners of the bridge, which is Guilford Railroad, and have them pay for the installation of some preventative method. So I would like, have we contacted them, Mr. Manager? Have we reached out to the owners? Because
I believe we've been in touch with the MBTA, which is actually, Mr. Bakey, would you like to comment on this?
That is correct. The owner of that particular bridge is actually the MBTA. It's not Guilford Rail. And so we have reached out to them. Initially, we had some trouble getting response, but I believe Eric Eby has gotten a call back, and he's trying to schedule a meeting with them, actually exactly for the purpose that you're describing. However, what we are hoping to ask them for is not just a sign, but in fact the system that the same studies that Eric has researched and found actually does work, which is an infrared sensor, which is set at the same height above the roadway as the bridge. And when a vehicle goes past, it trips the sensor, and that causes a dynamic lit sign to light up and alert them to stop and find another way to go. And that actually has proven to be effective in other places where it's been employed. Unfortunately, it's fairly expensive. It's about $10,000 per approach. And our hope is that we can speak with the railroad about asking them to address that cost. The concern is that while tends to be significant damage to the trucks when they hit the bridge, there doesn't tend to be significant damage to the bridge, so it isn't clear whether the MBTA will view this as a significant problem for them or not. Hopefully, we can convince them that it is.
But if I may add to Mr. Bakey's, we're working on that angle, but we're also, obviously, we're going to continue to move forward to put something in place to address this issue.
Yeah, I just think it's just a simple solution, and maybe it won't stop hopefully it'll stop 100% of them, but certainly, I mean, it's used on Stero Drive and so many other very busy thoroughfares. I don't know, I just think a sign low hanging with change or something, they use it in parking garage. I'm not going to belabor the issue, but I think for the people who have to deal with this problem time and time again, something should be done. If funding is an issue, I mean, that's an expensive proposition, infrared lights, and then there's going to be the cost of maintenance, and if it breaks down, I mean, signs are going to be low hanging, and it's just a difference of opinion. But I'd like to see something up there soon, Mr. Manager, so thank you.
Councilor Martin, and then Councilor Laurie, and then Councilor Mercia.
Thank you. This, the $10,000 number, to me, is not cheap. I assume it's a lot less than raising the bridge. And, I'm surprised to hear after that it's the MBTA, kind of a public agency that's in control. I know we have issues dealing with the railroad, but I would think there's other ways to get heard by a public agency. And I think maybe we should start with a redesign of the bridge. And, there's been a problem my whole life. I grew up around the corner from there, and we've had 2 recent incidents, but this is nothing new. And there's really never been any serious attempt to address it. So I'm appreciative of the efforts so far, but I think that message should be sent as well, that, this is, a public safety more than a nuisance. It's a real hazard that they should, in their plans, in the billions that the MBTA has to spend, that bridge in the city of Lowell should be part of their priority, what they're gonna work on.
Councilor Laurie. And then
Thank you,
Councilor
Mr. Mayor. With the original motion, it was to contact the owner, and one of the ideas I think I talked about that night, similar to Councilor Elliott, was if you go through a McDonald's or a Dunkin' Donuts, they have the PVC, anything that would warn the drivers. But I really like the idea of the laser. It is $10,000. The MBTA was in these chambers, I think, last year or 2 years ago. Financially, they're not. If they don't want to invest in $10,000, as Councilor Martin says, a redesign of that bridge, maybe we should ask the law department to draft up some type of legislation. It costs the city a ton of money to have a cop there. If that truck is there 2 or 3 hours, the police department has to put someone there for a couple of hours. And maybe we should start billing the MBTA. As Councilor Martin said, he grew up in that neighborhood, I grew up in that neighborhood. This isn't new, this has been going on for years. And the city incurs the cost. The poor guy that owns the furniture store, he can't do business. The guy selling subs, he can't do business. Everyone's put out, it seems, but the MBTA. And maybe we can do something at least to recover our cost. And when they see how much it really cost, when there's an accident there, they'll come forward and at least try to cooperate with the city. Thank you.
Councilor Mercia, and then Councilor
Thank you,
Kennedy.
Mr. Mayor. There was some talk that throughout the years, Gorb Street has been repaved, and perhaps the level grade of the street was less than what it actually is. So having said that some years ago, we thought it could be possible, but we sent people out there to actually measure it, and it is exactly the right height. So it's not like over the years we've hot-topped and it's closed in. It has not. It is exactly the way that it is supposed to be. And having said that, we did make some suggestions about a wire going across with chains if the truck driver can't hear that, or a wooden thing going across. I'd rather a truck hit that and break it and realize, ooh, gee, I'm not going under that. But it impacts the neighborhood, as Councilor Laurie said. It inconveniences residents, businesses, the like. The MBTA owns it. That's a little bit good because Guilford Transportation turned into Pan Am, and they're unproductive. They could probably care less. In fact, I'll say it, they could care less. But I'm wondering, why do we have a Department of Transportation? Why do we have a Department of Public Safety? Isn't this public safety? Isn't this that issue? Isn't it about transportation? Why do we have these state agencies? What are they going to do about it? If we can't do anything with the MBTA, maybe we should contact these two state agencies and tell them our dilemma and see if they can put a fire under their feet to make the MBTA be held accountable. It isn't the city's problem. It is the owner, and the owner is the MBTA, and they should be held accountable through these state agencies, and I think that's what we should do. Thank you.
Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the manager, I think. It sounds like there's no short-term solution to this. This is going to be an ongoing discussion in order to arrive at a solution. And I would think that the MBTA would probably have a menu of solutions. I mean, this can't be the only bridge where they have this problem. This problem has to have occurred and reoccurred in many different locations, and I'm sure that they probably know every possible solution to this problem and have some idea of the cost. And so that conversation with them, and also the availability of funding for the solution. And that conversation with them shouldn't take all that long. But two other things have occurred to me. One is there should be a detour route. In other words, if you're approaching the bridge and you're not going to fit under the bridge, then what do you do now? You're not going to just back up, and there's a lot of traffic there. And so there needs to be, I would think that truck drivers or whatever would need to be aware that there was a detour route that they could take in order to avoid the bridge. I'd also point out that although we're talking about it like it's a city problem, and I guess it is because it's in the city, it's a secondary highway with a bridge that's owned by the MBTA. So I kind of see the solution or the funding of the solution as being a state, the state would pick that up somewhere along the line. On the short term, because I'm thinking that this is going to take a while before it all gets settled out, what Councilor Elliott is suggesting is that in the short term, at least I believe if I heard him right, that we at least put up some signs and at least make some effort to make people more aware, or truck drivers more aware, that there is a height problem with that bridge. And that seems to me that it's at least a good solid first step and something that can be done pretty cheaply. And as long as those signs are put back away from the bridge at a reasonable place, then I think that drivers would at least be able to make some sort of alternative decision rather than to go under the bridge. So what do you think about that? Isn't that something that we could do rather quickly, at least put signs up on Gorham Street on both sides?
Mr. Manager.
One of the issues that you have in the southerly direction is that you aren't necessarily, all the trucks that go in that direction aren't necessarily going under the bridge. Some are going to be taking the left onto Moore.
Yes.
So you'd have to, if you put it too far forward, you are going to have the issue that they really aren't going to have any choice. So you have to pull it far enough back. And then you're going to be essentially whacking trucks that may not be going that direction anyway. I do realize that there's at McDonald's or other places they put something low hanging to sort of help, but typically vehicles that are going at into places like that are going at a very slow rate of speed. I'm not sure what impact there would be on a truck that went through something like that at a little bit faster rate of speed, whether that would do damage to the truck and there'd be some liability issues. I also think that there's issues, and this is why Eric is working this issue with the Department of Transportation and with the MBTA to know what type of state requirements are in place to put a sign like that. We have to keep in mind that we have to have signage that complies with the state standards for signage, so it isn't something that we can just necessarily do on our own. So this has been roughly less than a month that this request was made to us. The request that was made to us by the motion was that we contact the owners of the bridge, which we've done, regarding repairs and safeguard, which we're doing, including notification to the GPS systems, which we have done, and so that we prevent larger vehicles from striking the bridge, which is our goal. So we're moving forward with that. I'm not ruling out anything at this point in time. I'm just thinking we're working through the process, and we have a meeting that's being set up, and then we'll have to make a decision whether we push forward with the MBTA in some way, or the Department of Transportation, or get the necessary clearance to put the signs that we've talked about. So yes, it's all very feasible and very possible, but I think we have to be concerned about liability to the city, and we have to be concerned about compliance with state requirements for signage.
I'm not being critical of the effort that you're putting into it.
I understand.
All I'm saying is that on the short term, because this is going to take a long time, to put a sign up a couple of 100 yards away from the bridge on either side of Gorham Street seems like at least a measure that may help. And that's kind of all we're trying to do here is help. I can't imagine that anybody would object to a sign like that, especially if it was going to be put up on a short-term basis and if it was done in order to promote traffic flow and for public safety.
We'll take another look.
Councilor Noon?
Thank you, Mayor. I do concur with Councilor Kennedy. We can't wait for the MBTA discussions, maybe down the road. We need to do something now, if it just to have a sign there, indicated the height of that sign so that if the truck go by there, the truck is higher than that sign, the driver would know what to do with it. I agree with Councilor Elliott that Store Drive having those kind of sign too, and then you can divert it to a left off to the Boston area, the other side where it's not impeded with the height of the sign. Yes, going long term, we probably, since it's MBTA own this bridge, maybe talk to our state delegation to get their help to speak to the MBTA directors and or people in charge of it to get it fixed. Yes, GPS is a good idea, but the signs, the temporary sign, is not going to cost $10,000 or $100,000. So let's do something, because it seems as though it's happened, too often. And every time it happens, it's affecting the people in that area. It's affecting the business, and it costs the city money. So I would urge the manager and the administration to really put up some signs for a temporary basis while the discussions is continue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Manager?
I think that, just for clarification purposes, I think that there's a difference of what we're talking. I think, I might be wrong, there's a difference in what we're talking about here, and the memo sort of indicates the issues of the sign that are proposed to hang down over the roads, and what really works, and the potential for damage and the liability that goes with it, versus just some signs advising truckers that there's a low bridge ahead. I believe those signs are already in place. The issue is they're just not working. So again, we can put more signs like that up, but they probably still won't work, but we can certainly do that. The hanging signs that trucks could hit are the issue that we have. And again, I'm not opposed to them, other than the fact that there's liability that could be at risk here, and we likely need state approval to put those signs up. We all have to remember here that cities and towns are creations of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We don't get to make some of these rules. They make them for us because they're the ones that decide, what the rules are. So we need to clear all of that before we can just go off and do something like that. But we will follow through on that.
Councilor Elliott.
Do we know how many trucks, Mr. Manager, hit that bridge, or Mr. Bakey? How many trucks hit that bridge a year?
Do
we have any idea?
Deputy Ryan, if you know that?
Okay, say it's one a year, or maybe two. It's probably closer to two. Now, I don't know how old Council Martin is, but if you do some simple math, it's predictable. It's predictable that it's going to happen, and whatever it takes. No one's saying to break any rules, but if we wait for the MBTA, Mr. Manager, then we're going to have a whole lot more trucks hitting that bridge. And I don't want to belabor this issue, and we have already. I think it's a simple solution, not an expensive one. We're not trying to break any rules and still be in compliance. But if the state comes back and says, hey, guess what? That sign isn't in compliance, well, guess what? Your bridge is the problem, so you fix it. And I agree with Councilor Mercier. You know what? If these state agencies, they are just, the people they're just not responsive, and the people in South Lowell that has to tolerate this time and time again is, right, it's a nuisance, but it's a safety, it's a public safety issue, and we know it's going to happen again, whether truckers have GPS or whether they have infrared lights. I think we just want to be practical and respond to the people that live there and say, we heard you, we know it's going to happen. It's been a long-standing problem, and this is, at the very least, in the short term, what we're trying to do. That's all. Thank you.
Councilor Leahy.
Thank you. I'll belabor the point a little longer. No, I agree with the manager as far as, it could be liability with any type of a low-hanging sign, and speed is definitely a factor. But I agree with some of my colleagues too. Maybe the signage isn't visible as much, so maybe we just take a look at moving the signage around. Can we hang something reflective on their bridge? If they don't like it, they can take it down, but even a reflective strip on the bridge, because honestly, maybe we're so accustomed to that area, I don't see the signs that say Lowell Bridge. So that'd be my 2 cents. I just have one other thing on the motions, if we can jump around, right, on the motions, yeah. So I just want to comment on the answer for my motion for the construction of a new concession stand over Colley Stadium. So the answer we got from Director Ralph Snow is that they're going to develop a plan, work with the Friends of Lowell High for the concession stand. So I'd just like to see if we can incorporate, once we get the cost for that, I imagine it'd be cheaper if we had our own guys do it. So if we could incorporate that and make sure that, we get everybody involved, get that built with the direction of Friends of Lowell High and our DP, Department of Public Works. And, it doesn't have to be built next month, but by March would be nice. So we could, all right, April. But, if we could work with them and get that done, that'd be great. Thank you.
Councilor Lori.
Thank you. Just to answer the question about the signs, because I've been out there, there's a street sign that says 12 feet, probably across the street from Carter Ave. So they're blown by that, which would allow them to turn on Moore Street. There used to be a blinking light next to the bridge. I see a 12-foot sign there, so they're ignoring that. One of the problems I heard was when they go under the bridge, there's a hill, so they may clear it and they still get caught with the back of the truck. Coming down Gorham Street from O'Donnell's, there's actually a 12-foot sign up there that allows them to take a left on Maple Street. So there are signs, but nothing like I know Councilor Elliott talked about, nothing like that. Just in anticipation, the MBTA doesn't want to do really much to, and I had one firefighter tell me, even if they put blinking lights at the bottom of the bridge, on the bridge, that might help. I'd like to make a motion that the law department look at filing some type of legislation or an ordinance that we could possibly bill the MBTA for our time, the police department, the fire department. If they're not going to cooperate with the city, I'd like to at least try to recoup our cost when these things occur. If they're not going to cooperate, maybe the owners of the businesses in the area could do the same. But I'd like to make that motion instead of waiting. If the MBTA doesn't want to cooperate, we find a way to have the law department see if we can't bill the MBTA for our time and for our expenses. Thank you.
Motion by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Kennedy. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Wish there was this much interest while I was still living there, but any further discussion under communications? Councilor Leahy.
Thank you. At this time, could we just get an update on the water main breaks? Because I believe we had a few incidences today, and I'd like to commend the water department. I thought they did an excellent job for what they had to deal with. So it says a lot to their department. So I think, they really had their hands full today, and they handled it very well. Thank you.
Motion to suspend the rules by Councilor Leahy, seconded by Councilor Kennedy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Mr. Manager.
In summary, we had actually 5 water breaks today. The major ones, though, were out here on Dummer and up at the Stackpole Street. There was a break up there as well. Both of those have been repaired. As of 3:30 this afternoon, Harvard was still being worked on. There were still 2 other more minor issues that were being worked on as well. But Dummer and Stackpole were the major ones. Stackpole because it had an impact on a much larger area up in Belvedere. But they did do an outstanding job of getting in there, doing the work, and happy to report that those are fixed.
Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If there's any further discussion on him, that I'll, bypass that. But while we're under suspension later on, I have another issue that has come to my attention, but I'll wait till everybody's done with this discussion here.
Councilor Kennedy.
Just on the water mains, 5 breaks, that's unusual. How does that happen?
It is unusual, particularly at this time, in this type of weather conditions. In cold weather, you tend to have these. The one out on Dummer, we think may have been something that was longer term in nature. There'd been a leak that had been there because we're having some issues out there. We couldn't seem to find anything. Today we found it when it actually gave way. The others, just an odd occurrence, actually.
The one on Stackpole Street, didn't that break a while ago?
We did have an issue out there a couple of years ago that came in very, very cold conditions. I remember that one, and was much more difficult for them to fix. This one was, and there was actually some different supplies that were needed to fix that one. This one was a little bit easier, but I think there's some other issues out there, and I need to sit down with Ralph Snow and Dan Lahiff to go over some of those issues. Today their hands were full, and I wasn't able to get as full a report on that as obviously I want to get.
So this was not in the same place on Stackpole Street. It was a different.
I think it was a little
segment?
bit different. Same general area, but no, I don't believe it was the same one. No.
Okay. Is it just the age of the system? Is that?
That's a large part of. I think it reflects really what we've been saying is that we have an aging infrastructure here that does need reinvestment on a regular basis. Again, I need to get a little bit more information on the Stackpole to fully understand that. But it is odd to have. We tend to get multiple breaks in cold weather, and obviously today was a warm day. So we didn't. That is odd, but again, I'll have more information.
Well,
I didn't get a full report before I walked in here tonight. So
what are the issues that you're alluding to? What other issues would there be besides age of the system, or just
It would be, really, there is I think that's it. You know, it could be that there's any material that's put down, you know, when you're talking about anything that's produced, be a pipe or metal pipe, plastic pipe, any type of material, there can be some weaknesses in that occur. So it could be a brand new pipe that happened to be delivered here as opposed to Worcester. It has some type of defect that isn't going to be picked up in the quality control of the manufacturer. Again, I'm not sure what the issues are exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Elliott.
Thank you. I understand you don't have that information now, Mr. Manager, but we voted a loan order some time ago, specifically, and one of the phases was at Stackpole Street. And my understanding at that time was the cost was to include redundancy for that particular neighborhood. So I'm concerned, and that was the compelling argument. Look, if we lose this line, Belvedere section of the city loses their water. So I will be interested to hear exactly what the problem was, because the purpose of doing a lot of that infrastructure work was to prevent exactly what took place there. There was complete water loss, right, Mr. Manager?
Well, we had to shut it off because of that, right?
Okay, so I'll look forward to the report, but thank you.
Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On this particular topic, anything can happen when you have infrastructure under the ground and the piping is 100 years old, so God knows that can erupt at any time. If I were 100, I'd be erupting myself, but be that as it may, suspending the rules to ask through you, Mr. Mayor, to the city manager. I received a number of calls. In fact, I was at work the other day and a woman busted through the place, all hysterical about the alarm fees. I guess it's a $10 fee, and if you're late with receiving it, you get charged. And they were charged $332 for a $10 fee. I'm wondering, is there a company that, in other words, people didn't get the bill to pay the bill, but yet they're getting a letter stating they missed paying that fee, and now they're charged a fine of $332, and I'm getting calls left and right at home. Do we have any information we could tell the public?
Sure. This was an ordinance that was passed by the City Council back in the late winter, I believe, of 2006. And the background on the discussion that took place at that time, I'm not aware of. The ordinance itself, and actually Deputy Ryan could probably speak to this, the ordinance itself makes some sense to have alarms registered with the city so that we can have contact information in the case of, particularly in the case of false alarms. There's also within the ordinance that was approved by the City Council, there's language regarding false alarms, a number of false alarms that you have. Unfortunately, when the ordinance was put in place in early 2006, there really wasn't a mechanism in place to implement the ordinance, which is often the case with ordinances. There's good rationale, but there aren't necessarily the systems in place to handle that. Beginning in 2009, Superintendent LaValle and I spoke about this, and he attempted through in the police department to start to enforce this ordinance and implement this ordinance with mixed results, to say the least, probably very little in the way of results. We looked at a number of different options, and he had come across some companies that actually provide this service, one in particular. We spoke to that company. They came in. We put it out to bid. They came in with a proposal that would enforce this ordinance for us or help us administer this ordinance. That is occurring. The ordinance itself, though, has some issues that would not have otherwise jumped out when the council. I'm sure when the council adopted this, they weren't aware of how some of the ramifications of how the ordinance would exactly work. I know that we weren't. But one of the issues, or one of the references in there, is that if you do not register your alarm system, that there's a $300 fine. And so that was all built in when this alarm ordinance was being implemented within the last few months. That was built into the software system, that if we sent out a bill, they didn't pay it, or they didn't register, by virtue of paying the $10 fee, they didn't register their alarm, that a $300 fine would be imposed. And in any event, we've been receiving quite a few calls ourselves and talking to people. Some people don't have alarms that got these bills. Some people had paid the $10, but they were paying it under a different account number because there was some issues with the data that was being generated from the alarm companies versus the data that we had. In any event, we're working through some of those issues right now. We did speak with the company, though, today, and we've advised them to wipe out the $300 fines on everybody that just received them. Several hundred people did receive that. And we're reworking the ordinance. Within the next several days, they will, everyone that has a phone number, within the next day or two, everyone that has a phone number connected to their account will receive a phone call from the company telling them to ignore that $300. Within the next week, everyone that received a $300 bill will receive a piece of correspondence indicating the same.
Right.
So we are taking care of all of that and working out some of the bugs in terms of the rollout of the ordinance. But the chief and the chief was in on that meeting today, and he stands, we discussed the value of the ordinance, and it does have quite a bit of value in the chief's opinion. And again, I've seen this in other communities, and it works well. But it just needs, the implementation is the issue that needs to be worked out, and I think we're going to have to come back to the council with some modifications so that there's clarity as to how this should be administered. But for the sake of right now, everyone's going to be notified. We're wiping that out, and we're going to be improving that system.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Manager, because people were hysterical, to say the least.
I don't blame them.
And it's one thing to get a bill and not pay it, but they didn't receive a bill to begin with, but yet they received a $332 fine penalty.
That's right.
So,
Yeah,
thank you, Mr.
We're working
Manager.
that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Elliott.
So, Mr. Manager, we all got an email, excuse me, from an individual who said you got the same thing happen. He's been trying to call this telephone number, and he says he's left several messages, the number listed on the bill, but no one picks up. So he's clearly very distressed. What is that number? Do you know?
I don't have that in front of me.
It's an 877-874-6657. So it's not
It's a toll-free number. Is the 877 number.
Is that a city toll-free number, or whoever is managing the?
People managing the system. And
Okay.
so I'm not sure. We've already been in touch with that individual and are working with him to.
Well, I won't give his name,
Yeah.
but, okay.
Yeah.
So, can the company pick up, because I'm sure do we work with the company, say, can you answer your phone and answer your messages, so
Right.
people won't be, at least they'll know that we're responding?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion under communications? Entertain a motion to accept and place on file by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Leahy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Being after 7 o'clock, we'll move to the public hearing portion of the agenda. First item on that portion of the agenda is a vote to adopt the minimum residential factor. And City Council vote adopting the minimum residential factor for fiscal year 2013. It is voted by the City Council of the City of Lowell as follows: to adopt the minimum residential factor of 83.8601% for fiscal year 2013, which will shift the share of the levy to the commercial, industrial, and personal property classes. Reading by title. In City Council vote adopting the minimum residential factor for fiscal year 2013. At this time, I'd open up for those wishing to speak in favor. In favor? In favor. Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. I'd open it up for those wishing to speak in opposition. In opposition? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the council? Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the past 17 years that I have been here, it's always been a shift to the commercial, industrial, personal property. And businesses, and I received a number of calls between the fire alarm and this particular issue here as well. And business people told me, and I'm just bringing their message up, because no matter what we do is very difficult. I know that residential homeowners, many are on fixed incomes. It's very, very difficult, but businesses are getting hit hard as well from all sides. The bubble is going to burst, is what they told me, and I'm sure people are hurting at all levels, residential, businesses, etc. Between the fees, our businesses are subjected to fines and permits. They're getting hit hard. They don't send their children to take part in education, but still they're responsible for this portion of it. They have no trash pickup, but they provide their own. Businesses pay $100 2 times a year. That's $200 for a test on their backflow valve, not to mention the $10 for having an alarm that is not even hooked up to the city. It's hooked up to a private alarm company, and they pay $250 to the private alarm company. There are more permits and fees than the residents have to pay, not to mention the fact that their tax rate is doubled, and even more than doubled, the tax rate per thousand. And I know how tough it is, and I can see that. And I don't know if we could back up the shift to make it a little less. I don't know what the answer is, but if we could look at doing something so we don't I'm just nervous about the businesses here. They could easily say, you know what, I'm stretched to the limit. I can't take this anymore. I'm going somewhere where the tax rate is level for everybody. Having said that, I wanted to bring that message forward. And I want to just speak out loud that maybe our assessor, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the city manager, may have some insight into what I'm going to say next, because it's troubling to me. And you have to look at all angles before you set a tax rate. It has become a revelation recently when I read the newspaper of the increase in property taxes that have plagued the towns of Chelmsford and Westford, and the fact that Chelmsford will be paying 5 times more in higher taxes than they least expected only months before. And I shudder to think that we're holding the line to 0% to a minimal property tax increase, which I'm hoping is 0%. And lead our constituents to believe that, and then all of a sudden, we ourselves fit into the scenario of Chelmsford or Westford. The reason that I'm concerned is that when this is happening in these municipalities, the blame seems to be on declining values of property. Right here in the city of Lowell, we're faced with the same pattern to some degree, declining property values. Just look at the last few weeks in the paper, and we see that the Saab building sold for $700,000, and the property was valued at $1.1 million or thereabouts. And not too long ago, the building over Dunkin' Donuts at the corner of Central and Merrimack Street sold for $200,000, and it was assessed for $1.2 million. This pattern makes me concerned to think there is less value to assess, and the rates will go up like those other towns. So my question to either you, Mr. Manager, or the assessor is, if this trend continues, will this or could this happen in the city of Lowell? That's my concern.
Mr. Manager?
I'll ask Ms. LeMay to give the specifics of where we are with our values, but in the case of some of these surrounding communities, they in fact have a single rate of taxation, so that's a difference. Both the communities you mentioned, Chelmsford and Westford, have seen their commercial values drop substantially while simultaneously having a single tax rate. So there doesn't seem to be a correlation between the values of the properties and the tax rate that's out there. Another caveat I would throw in there, and some of the values you mentioned seem in line, that they're assessed at one, and they when they sell, they come in a little bit below. There was one you mentioned that was substantially low, and that you have to ask whether it was truly an arm's length transaction, or whether in fact there were other extenuating circumstances that affected the value. You have to, so sometimes it's not, when you look at a single family home, generally speaking, you can use market data of what it was sold for and what it's assessed. With commercial properties, there are oftentimes other circumstances that drive the values, based upon the tenants that are there, based upon perhaps the business is being bought, the equipment that might be going with it, that affects the values. So that's each commercial case. It tends to be a little bit different, and there are complexities that go with that. In the case of Lowell, the levy, as we promised the council, the levy is going to remain the same, within a certain parameter, and that's either way based on the rounding that might have to take place. So a year from now or a month from now, we might say, it went up by $10,000 or it went down by $30,000, all due to the penny. I will tell you that we will keep it below the current levy that we're charging, to keep our commitment to the city council and to the citizens of the city. But when we say there's going to be zero tax increase this year, that the levy is going to remain the same, I want to clear to everyone, and I think everyone here knows this, doesn't mean every single person's property tax is going to remain the same, because everyone's value is doing something different. A ranch in Pawtucketville may see their tax bill go down. A colonial in Belvedere may see their bill go up a little bit. That happens. Even leaving it at zero, it's going to have some impact. Likewise, classes of property. Single families are going to do something different than 2 and 3 families, and they're going to do something different than commercial and industrial, all varied upon what the current market conditions are that we have to have approved by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But maybe Ms. LeMay can speak specifically to what's happened to commercial properties here. I believe, based upon the information that I've received, that the commercial properties here, commercial and industrial, have not been as precipitous a drop as has happened in those other communities, which, again, as I would point out, do have a single tax rate.
Right. And the thing is that what you have to remember, first of all, some of the sales that you were talking about, Councilor, those were state sales, so they're not arm's length sales. We can't even take them into consideration. We do an interim valuation every year, so our values don't fluctuate as much as some communities that don't do that. That's why I've always wanted to do it. The residential properties did decrease in value this year, not by much though, anywhere between single families 1%, the condominiums like 2%. The commercial properties were pretty solid. They didn't really see much of a decrease. It's the industrial that we saw this year. And I mean, there's no rhyme or reason for it other than it may be just the tenants, as you were speaking about, or the expenses that it takes, because some of those buildings are much larger. So we saw the decrease in industrial this year, which does hurt the residential when it comes time to taxes. We don't have as much value in the commercial, industrial, and personal property. Personal property was wonderful because we're doing a relist, just as we are with the rest of the real estate. The other thing you have to think of is that we don't, and people comment on this all the time, is we don't assess on current value, we assess on a year ago. So this tax rate for fiscal 13 is literally based on the sales of the calendar year 2011. So and that's every community in Massachusetts. It would be impossible, especially for a city of this size, to value 25,000 properties in 3 months.
Could I ask, through you, Mr. Mayor, to another question of the assessor? A certain amount of money is put aside each year for abatements. Is that right?
That's correct. It's abatements, it's the work-off program over at the Council on Aging, and it's the blind and elderly exemptions, veterans exemptions, all come out of that pot.
And any money left over in that pot goes where?
Well, there used to be, years ago, some money left over in that pot before the tax rates went up. But if there's any money left over when every ATB case is either settled, withdrawn, or I can surplus it. There's just nothing right now to surplus because I have more liability than I do money in those accounts.
So if someone came to you for an abatement and they were qualified, we would have money, even if it were in the arrears, to give them that abatement, right?
Yes.
We wouldn't say we don't have enough money, so you're not gonna, even though you qualify, so we always...
I actually couldn't do that by law. That's one account, I'm sure Tom doesn't like to hear this, but that's one account that I can overspend if I need to.
All right, and my very last question, whatever was done at the last review when we learned that the tax bills went out showing a full 2.5% increase, and we were told that it was a mistake and that we had to wait to the third quarter for the mistake to be corrected or the overage to be corrected. Was this ever reported to the Department of Revenue so that if it ever happens again, it could be corrected in the next quarter bill and not wait until the third quarter bill? Remember that incident happening and it was corrected or leveled off or made right in the third quarter, and we said, I don't think that's acceptable, but that's the way the law said. Did anybody ever contact the... Yes, okay.
Yes,
Oh, you contacted them personally? So let me get an answer here for the public that...
Mr. Manager.
You may recall at the time I asked the city
excuse me.
manager if it could be
Councilor
done in
Kennedy.
the third quarter rather than or the second quarter rather than to wait.
Right.
And in anticipation of the city manager's response, I called the Department of Revenue myself. With the help of one of our state representatives, I was put in touch with a pretty knowledgeable person who told me that it can't be that way. It has to be done 6 months and 6 months. It's just because we take the option of sending the bills out quarterly, but you can't, it could not be done in the second quarter. We had to wait till the second half.
So there's nothing through our fault of negligence that we can't do it. It's the law.
Right.
It's the law, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's good. I just wanted to know that.
But they will be reflected in the change will be reflected in the third quarter that's going out at the end of this month.
Okay, people should know that. That's why I asked it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Laurie and then Councilor Mendonça.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had one question. It'll be the first time I'm voting on this. I know it's been around for years in the city. If we refuse to pass this and it was an even tax rate, how much would the average tax owner pay on their bill?
Ms. LeMay?
Well, I can tell you that the rate would be like $17.90 per thousand, and I can get my calculator and figure that out.
So, and what are they paying now, 14?
The average single family? No, it's more like,
I think he's looking for the rate, the single family,
Oh,
the
rate right
residential
now,
rate. It's
for fiscal 12, it was $14.77, yeah.
Okay, so it's about a $3 or $4 rate increase for the average person.
Right, so you're talking about $900, roughly?
So the average homeowner would pay almost another $1,000.
What's 3,000 times
For a flat?
$3? Two what? All right, so 2,000. 600, 600? About 600.
About $600 the average homeowner will be paying extra if we don't approve this. You know, and one of the other things I looked at the past week when I knew this was coming up, some of the businesses do get TIFs that the homeowners don't get. The last time I looked, I think we have 6 or 7 companies getting TIFs, so they're getting tax breaks there.
I know, but they don't.
I think it's about 10. We have
About 10 companies,
Yeah,
and the average homeowner won't get a tax break like a TIF.
Correct.
Okay, so that's another benefit they get. Okay, thank you.
Councilman Donza.
Yes, I may have started this discussion last year. I'm glad it's happening, even if some are reluctant to support it. I mean, if you go back, the lowest tax rate we've had in recent memory was fiscal year 2006, at which time it was $10.07 per thousand. Now, the reason for that was not because we had lower taxes that year. I think during the Finance Subcommittee meeting, the manager pointed out there was actually a tax increase. The reason for that was because in the span of about 3 years, the total values of properties in Lowell went from just under $4 billion to over $7 billion. So the property values nearly doubled. That was the real estate bubble that burst and caused this great recession that we've been in. And so that's the date I picked. From the lowest tax rate in 2006 until the rate that's being proposed today. And by the way, I want to thank Mr. LeMay for answering my questions. She provided some data for me. The tax rate will be going, if we accepted the recommendation, from $10.07 to $15.01 for the residential rate. That's an increase of just under $5 in that time period. The commercial rate for the same period would be going from $19.89 per thousand to $31.33, which is well over $11. So while the residential rate has gone up under $5 per thousand in the period, the commercial rate over the same period is going to increase over $11. Actually at 11 and 43 or 44. And there is a slight decrease in the total commercial, industrial, and personal property of about 12 million, but that's out of over $1 billion, so it's maybe 1%. So it's not a huge decline, but it is declining. But overall, our property values are still near $7 billion, even with all the declines that have gone on over this period. So after that initial increase, they seem to have held their values. I know that I've been following the sales, and although single-family properties tended to hold their value, the multifamilies have declined considerably and often sell well below the assessed values. And this is not a criticism of the assessor's office, because there are many sales that I'm looking at that they can't include in their calculations. So given their process, they're doing the right thing. But still, if you look at sales, they tend to be more overvalued in the commercial and the multifamilies. And so at a given rate, those properties will tend to pay more than maybe their real value might be, but that could change as it did in early 2000s very rapidly in the other direction. And as Mrs. LeMay said, we're doing 1 year behind. We're doing calendar year 2011, which is why I can tell that those sales were low. But as you move forward, we're also going to be lagging when values go up again. I had also asked Mrs. LeMay what it would be for a shift, because no one is proposing that we go back to 1.1, because that would be a huge cost to residential properties. but what it would take to keep the value of the commercial tax rate under 30,000. Maybe very close to it, maybe just a tiny bit over, because like the round, it could easily go a few pennies or either way. And the number I was given was that to come close to that, the rate that we shift, which is currently 1.75%, would need to go down to 1.67%. And then at that rate, the residential rate would be about 32 cents higher than a proposal. But the commercial rate would drop by $1.30, roughly. So that, again, it's all because of that shift. They're already paying more than 2 times the residential rate. And that's because it's very complicated. I tried to look into it, and I got confused by looking at Chapter 58, Section 1A, that has all these minimums and maximums and protections against one class being overtaxed versus another, which is why we're actually, in this vote, putting in the what they call the residential factor, which is separate from the shift. And that basically is a calculation to keep the ratios of commercial to residential roughly even as they change. And then we apply, so we have to apply both the residential factor, which is listed in the vote, and the shift of 1.75%. And that's where we're actually getting a rate for commercial that's not 1.75% higher. It's over 2% higher. Well, not 2%, 2 times higher. So, I mean, I know it's not popular, but we have been, as I said earlier, the taxes for the commercial rate have gone up substantially. Now, this does not affect at all what the city receives in the tax levy. That's the total amount we're going to tax. All this does is change where we get the money from. How much from commercial, how much from residential. And so I'll just throw out a trial balloon. I make a motion that we change the shift to 1.67% just to keep the commercial rate hopefully under or very close to $30 per thousand.
Motion by Councilman Donza.
Wait a minute.
Change the shift to 1.67%.
Before it's,
Council Mercia.
Mr. Mayor, before it's seconded, could she explain, she wants to talk, and I want to hear that before. Yes.
Well, I had looked up what the shift, what a 1.67 shift would do to the residential average tax bill, and that would increase it by about $85, 84.60, about $85 for the year.
And the commercial rate would go down by?
Yeah, the commercial rate would go down to $29.89.
That's the rate, what's the dollar amount compared to residential $85? Because the $85 is the average dollar amount.
Right, there's really no way to get an average commercial value.
Okay. But there are 2 different numbers. The $85 is the average bill with the rate change, not the rate.
No, the $85 is the average increase
By increase, okay.
to the average tax bill.
Thank you. Motion's on the floor by Councilman Donza.
Second.
Is the motion seconded?
Not yet. Any second?
Well, I'd second for purposes to the discussion, but
Seconded by Council Martin.
I don't have anything to add. I think the discussion's pretty much already taken place.
Anyone on the motion? Councilor Elliott and then Councilor Kennedy.
I do think that we need to help businesses. I don't think it's as difficult as it can be made out to be. The shift differential and the way it's calculated could be, but to me, it's really very simple. The levy is the levy. It's 104.4 this year, 104 million. If you want to help, nobody does, and I agree, because we don't want to hurt residential homeowners, property owners, because taxes have gone up enough. And on the other hand, we hear businesses, it hurts businesses, and they are paying pinched, and there's fees, water fees, permit fees, license fees. So the solution is to stop spending or to reduce your spending level. It's not very difficult. If you don't want to levy this much on businesses and you don't want to hurt homeowners, then in order to do that is you can't spend as much. And I think that's where we should be, and that's why I advocate that we shouldn't be spending as much. But put a plan in place. I agree. In 06, it was the lowest level as a result of a number of factors. So if we want to entice businesses to come into the city, we just spoke about TIFs. Businesses will come into the city if we can reduce their direct costs, the costs that they know, their fixed costs is the word I wanted. And so we adopt a TIF. That's an incentive for economic development. In communities, and I don't know this exactly what the rate is, but when businesses come and locate outside the city, it's got to have. They've got to be looking at what the tax rate is. So I understand and I appreciate and feel we do have to help business. The more businesses we have, the more they can help relieve the burden of property taxes, and that's what we should be looking at. And we need to put a plan in place, okay? How do we help businesses? We have reserves. Maybe we should use the reserves to reduce the levy and to help businesses. And so it's more of a plan that has to be put in place to reduce the tax levy. It's really pretty simple.
Councilor Kennedy?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, through you to Mrs. LeMay, if I could, since the referendum passed that allowed cities to do this, has there ever been a time in your memory when Lowell has not had the minimum residential factor?
Now, is your question asking is there a time that we didn't use the 1.75, that we shifted below the 175?
We shifted it to give the break to commercial and industrial property.
Yes.
Has that ever happened?
Yes. It was I think it was in fiscal 93. Could have been 92, but I think it was fiscal 93. What I had found at that time was that the way that the values had come in, the residential values had come in a lot higher than the commercial. Or just the opposite, I should say. That was the time to do it, because when we made the recommendation to shift it back from 175, my recommendation was to go to 165, because the residential taxpayers would have had an increase, but it wouldn't have been a big increase. And the council at that time took a look at it and decided to shift back 5% with the promise that they'd look at another 5% within the next coming years. The values never came in so that I could recommend another shift. And what happened is they reversed again, so they went back to the 175, and they've been there ever since. So that it was at 160, it was at 170 for about 2 years.
Okay, so since the referendum passed, which I think is around like 1980 or something, has there just been one fiscal year? Do you remember it ever happening again or before that?
It didn't happen after that, and I don't recall it happening before that, but that was before I was doing it, so.
Okay. Thank you. I think that
All right.
you can try and help out businesses, but you're going to hurt residential taxpayers a lot in order to help businesses a little. And I don't think that it's worth it. I mean, I've spent a good amount of time on the city council this year trying to make sure that we have no tax increase. And to sit here tonight and vote for a shift that would then impose a tax increase on residential homeowners is just, I can't understand. I certainly wouldn't support that, but neither can I understand why anybody else would want to support that. And I would suggest that rather than to give a little bit of relief to businesses or commercial and industrial property owners, really what this council should be focused on is broadening the whole tax base. And that should be an endless quest of this city council to broaden the tax base. And if you do that, that's how you're able to keep taxes down for everybody so that everybody's paying a fair share and allow revenues to rise. Because although it's good to say that, you know, we just have to spend less and spend less, the fact of the matter is that that's just not going to happen. Everything gets to be more and more expensive. And so the answer really is not to go away from the minimum residential factor. The answer is to focus on broadening the tax base. And that's all I've got to say.
Councilor Lowry and then Councilor Martin.
I'm all set. I'm all set, thank you.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you. I think Councilor Kennedy's comments are actually right on the money. And I think the policies of the city council, and even before I was elected, prior councils have all been and kind of bought into the notion that the way to lower the taxes on everybody is through economic growth and broadening of the tax base. Now, in the current economic climate we're coming out of, it's been difficult to do that, but we've done better than most places. But I couldn't agree more that should be, you know, our primary goal here. And in fact, I think I remember the debate where Mrs. LeMay is talking about the shift at that time. Now, that's before I was on the council, but I was paying attention then. And we had a series of actual commercial real estate brokers testify in favor of the maximum residential shift, because in their mind it was more important to the vitality of the city to maintain the health of the middle class and the middle class taxpayers, and that overall was going to be as much of a recipe for success as the city as the values of commercial real estate. So we're in the position then, and I think in the position now, where, you know, it's the vitality of the middle class in the city that we need to focus on, because that's a good indication of economic strength. It keeps our test scores better in the school system. All the things that come from having a solid middle class are important. And I think, you know, by focusing on economic growth, then as we saw, you know, when the commercial rate was so low, under $20, that was a period of rapidly escalating values. Now, we don't want bubbles, but we do want progressive increases in values, and we're starting to see some signs of that. If you read even the financial pages in most of the papers today, there were reports released that we're finally starting to see things like we saw in the early 90s, you know, prices leveling off, sales increases, not big price increases, especially in residential areas, but it's improving. It's, you know, market conditions are improving, and so we do have the opportunity to seize on economic growth. And I think that to back off from this policy right now is just not the right thing to do.
Thank you. Councilor Noon and then Councilor Mercier.
Thank you, Mayor. I do concur with Councilor Kennedy that is we are trying so hard to not increase property taxes to the residential, and to do this to you know, change the shift as suggested by Councilor Mendonça would really go against what we are trying to do. You know, if I may, I know that Adam Backey, who's you know, the DPD directors, and probably have encountered many businesses coming to the city. I'm sure the first question they probably ask him is, you know, is this a safe city? The second would be probably, is this a great school, good school? Third maybe is you're going to have quality employee. The last question, I'm sure, will be, what is your commercial rate? What is your tax rate for, I mean, commercial rate? That will be the last question, I'm sure. You know, in these big businesses coming to the city of Lowell. And there are ways, I'm sure, that a commercial can go about supplement or this increase in commercial rate that Ms. LeMay have indicated over the past couple of years. It's going from 19 to 31, and overall it's 11 per thousand. And it's not a whole lot, and to do otherwise, to change this, to vote against this motion, shift from commercials to from residential to commercial, certainly going to increase the taxes for single home. I can't see council support this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly don't want to overburden the residents. No doubt about that. I don't think any of us do. I'm just merely bringing forth a message from the businesses that discuss the fact that they're just about at a limit where they feel that it's tough for them. And you don't broaden a tax base when you have a message out there that says, we just can't take this anymore. I'm not suggesting that we hurt the residents. I'm just simply bringing forth a message from business owners, and to say that they're getting a TIF. How many businesses do we have out there that started many years ago? They're not getting a TIF. New business that are coming here, if they're meeting a criteria where they hire so many X number of people, they probably could get a TIF. It's not a rapidly distributed commodity that we're handing out TIFs left and right. But be that as it may, this is how you broaden the tax base. When you take an entity like an old school and which generates no money, no revenue, and you turn it into apartment units, that is broadening your tax base. And that is a good thing. It doesn't happen all the time. I am supporting your shift. I just wish that perhaps we could have shifted it instead of down to 1.67, but to shifted it from 1.75 to 1.70 and offer the commercial business property a little bit of a break. Maybe those that don't get a TIF, but you can't discriminate there and say, well, because you get a TIF, you're not gonna. That's merely, I'm tossing around suggestions, because I'm thinking that if for some reason we shifted it from 1.75 to 1.70, and then we use some of that money from the free cash to offset the $87,000 that we transferred to the police overtime, that they came up before us and probably would have raised some money in the tax rate. If then we could have used some of that free cash to offset what we just did to the residents. I don't know if it could be done. I'm offering out as a question. Could that be possible? So that everybody gets some sort of a break. Maybe it can't be done.
Is the
Mr.
question,
Manager.
is the question whether we could reduce the levy by $87,000?
No, the question is, could we take that 1.75 shift and move it back to 1.70 to help out the commercial residential, and with a little bit of addition of the money going to the tax-paying residents, the residential property, could we then use some free cash to offset it and help them as well? Could we do that?
Well, there's a variety of things. Well, it's
And
tough.
make everybody happy.
The moving it back to 170 would probably impact the residential. I'm not sure. Do you have that number?
By about $78.
About $78.
$78 for the year, not a quarter.
That is for the year.
Okay, and having said that, we're helping the businesses to some degree. Can we then get some free cash money and offset that Whatever
You'd
that-
need about $2.5 million of free cash money, which then, as we discussed at the Finance Subcommittee, then the question would become how you fill that in next year.
I'm just tossing these suggestions out there. I don't have an answer. I just want to get a picture, that's all. That's all.
Councilor Kennedy and then Councilman Danza.
I just don't want it to be lost that the goals, or one of the goals that we've set here, is to have zero tax increase for residents.
Right.
For this year. That, the same holds true theoretically for commercial industrial users, that they would have no tax increase. So their taxes aren't going to go up, their taxes would stay the same as well. So I don't know if that puts a smile on anybody's face, but it's something. I mean, it seems to me that for the past 6 or 7 years, people that own industrial or commercial property, their taxes have gone up, and they won't go up this year.
Councilman Danza.
Just another little statistic. Right now, about a little over 82% of our properties are classified as residential, and under 18% is classified as commercial. And that's why it's a bigger pool in which to spread out any increase. So we actually, that's why I said earlier on that it would be a shift of 30 cents in residential, but $1.30 in the commercial rate. And that's basically two things. It's the shift that we already have and the difference in the percentage of the values, the classification. So, but vast majority of our properties are residential, and hence I see it's politically expedient to serve those rather than the businesses, which is a much smaller number. But still, I figure I'd take a chance and try to help out our businesses, because it's just important to have a job to pay the taxes as it is to be able to pay the taxes in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion, which again is to reduce from 1.75 to 1.67? Councilor Elliott.
Well, I did just want to follow up, because it really is as simple as just not spending as much. The manager just confirmed that if we wanted to take free cash and offset any proposed increase for our businesses or our homeowners, you got to reduce the levy. So, broadening, the business tax base and, and that's good economic development. That sounds good. But it doesn't ever come into place. The tax rate has gone up for businesses since 2000. It's gone up since 2006 steadily, and it's going to go up again. So while we can talk about it, businesses come to the city, they want a TIF, they want their costs reduced, and they'll create jobs. It sounds good, but it's not practical. And the cost of doing business, talk to the businesses. I mean, I've heard it. It's becoming unaffordable for the businesses that have been there. The people that, the businesses coming in that are getting a TIF, yes, it's more attractive. That's why we want them to come in. But the cost of doing businesses for our existing businesses it's becoming unaffordable for them to operate. So if we want to do something like this, we have to be, you just look at during June when we're setting the budget. And if we want to make, that is a time where we make a decision. This is what we're going to spend. How can we help businesses? And then at that time we say, well, let's not spend as much. This is what the levy is. Let's bring down the tax rate for the businesses. Homeowners won't be affected, and then adopt it at that time. But now we've backed ourselves into the corner. We're saying, well, this is what the levy is. So somebody's got to bear the burden, and that's what this discussion is all about. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Roll call, please. On Councilman Danza's motion to reduce from 1.75 to 1.67. Roll call, please.
Councilor Mercia.
No.
Mayor Murphy.
No.
Councilor Noon.
No.
Councilor Elliott.
No.
Councilor Kennedy.
No.
Councilor Leahy.
No.
Counsel Lowry.
No.
Counsel Martin.
No.
Counsel Mendoza.
Yes.
1 yeas.
Thank you. What's the wish?
Move adoption.
Move to adopt the minimum residential factor by Counsel Kennedy, seconded by Counsel Lowry. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Counsel Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Counsel Nunn.
Yes.
Counsel Elliott.
Yes.
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy.
Yes.
Counsel Lowry.
Yes.
Counsel Martin.
Yes.
Counsel Mendoza.
No.
8 yeas.
Thank you. Next, we have an ordinance for quarterly traffic in November. Motion to waive the full reading by Counsel Martin, seconded by Counsel Mendoza. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reading by title in City Council ordinance. An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances for the City of Lowell, Massachusetts. The code with respect to Chapter 266, entitled Vehicles in Traffic. At this point, I'd open it up for those wishing to speak in favor. In favor? In favor? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. I'd open it up for those wishing to speak in opposition. In opposition? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Which was wish of the council?
Move approval.
Move for approval by Counsel Mercia, seconded by Counsel Leahy. On the motion, Counsel Leahy.
Sure. Okay. So the vote is to approve everything on this ordinance?
That's correct.
Okay. So I had a question on Elaine Street. Let's see. So the ordinance would prohibit parking from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. all day long on the entire street?
Mr. Manager?
Mr.
Mr. Bakey?
Thank you. The ordinance makes two changes on Eileen Street, both of which I believe have already been made by trial order. This is just bringing those orders into a permanent ordinance. It would repeal the previous prohibition, which was from the prohibited parking from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and it would install a prohibition from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. of on-street parking along Eleni Street. And that is as a result of, our transportation engineer conducted a survey of all of the residents of Eleni Street who would be impacted by this, giving them a number of different options. This was the one that they preferred, almost unanimously. And again, this is already in effect on the basis of a trial order. The quarterly ordinance is basically just housekeeping to clean up and make permanent those trial orders that were successful during the previous quarter.
So what if you can't park in front of your house at night then? Do you have a sticker for your car or something?
No, again, this would prohibit parking on the street at night. The residents who would be directly impacted by this were surveyed, and I presume they all approved it because they generally all have driveways. And that's where they park their cars. I believe there was an issue with non-residents parking on the street, which is what they were concerned with, and they were given a range of different options in a survey of a prohibition on a portion of the street, a different time prohibition, and so forth. This was the version that was, again, almost unanimously approved by the residents out there.
All right. I mean, this just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, what if somebody moves out and I move up there and you can't, I mean, because of 3 or 4 people that park on that street from the apartments, how can we as a city say you can't park on your street? I don't understand that.
Well,
And I know you probably asked some of the residents, but, I just don't get it. I talked to one resident up there who, had his mother-in-law sleep over, and she got a ticket because they put the car in front of the house, but it just seems like we're overstepping our bounds by telling people you can't park in front of your house. I mean, I know the neighborhoods are different. I know certain neighborhoods you have to get a placard to park in front of your house. I think that's crazy too. I think it's insane that we have to pay for permits to park in front of our house when people should just be have courtesy for their neighbors. But this just seems to me like we're really overstepping our bounds by having ordinances saying that you can't park on your public street. And so, I mean, this is all legal because we adopt it.
I'll let the city solicitor confirm, but I believe this is a legal ordinance. But it's a matter of council policy as to whether this is something that you feel is appropriate or not. And ultimately, that's why you're voting on it. If you as a body feel that this is not an appropriate use of the public street, that it should be open to all, which I think, there's a reasonable philosophy around that, you certainly can vote against either this piece or the entire ordinance. But I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe there's anything illegal about what is proposed, which again is the will of the residents of that particular street.
No, this would be consistent with, well within the jurisdiction of the council to make these types of determinations, and again, it's traditionally done on a trial basis to see how it's implemented, how it works with people, but ultimately, once adopted into the council, this would just be one of many traffic issues that is instituted by the council.
And I mean, how do we did survey, but what does that mean? Did we have residents sign something saying that this is fine with them, or we just asked their opinion, or?
In this case, we mailed a written survey to every property that fronts on Alini Street, and we received back almost all of them, and of the ones we received back, I believe all but one were in favor of what was then enacted as a trial order. And again, that is what's the case today, and what is before you this evening is a vote as to whether to make that 60-day trial order permanent by ordinance.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilman Johnson and then Councilor Kennedy.
Well, I was just going to bring up, I mean, this was not initiated by the city. I believe this was initiated by residents of the street, correct? Through the mayor.
Yeah, the original sort of ball was put in motion on this one by a citizen request.
Yeah, and it has been in a trial order and in effect for about 60 days, so I'm thinking that if the resident of Streets were opposed to it, they'd be here this evening and let us know, which nobody spoke against, so thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When the survey was done, was one of the options none of the above? In other words, if there were 4 options and this would have been the least offensive, then people would vote for this, but that really wouldn't be the first choice. Do you know that? Are you familiar with?
I don't want to misspeak, but my recollection of what was on the survey ranged from an option of just making the street free for everyone to a complete restriction, and there were a number of options along the way. I'm not sure what none of the above would have been beyond those options, but that was not an option.
Well, do nothing would be none of the above, right?
True, although at the time the survey was being taken, do nothing was, it's a technical matter, but do nothing was actually a problem because we had conflicting ordinances on the books that we were trying to correct by the trial order at the time. Okay. You may recall it was a few months ago, there was a whole discussion of, well, what exactly is in effect. A trial order had been passed something like 10 or 12 years before, at that time at the request of the residents. It was allowed to expire by never making permanent by an ordinance. However, the signage remained in place. So there was a lot of uncertainty as to what was actually in place. So do nothing was a challenging option at the time. And
I'm really just asking about whether or not the survey allowed for people to express a different opinion that may not have been on the survey, that's all.
well, there's always an opportunity for people to supply comment.
I'm sorry?
There's always an opportunity for people to supply comment.
Yep, okay. All right, thanks.
Any further discussion?
Motion.
Roll call, please.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Nunn.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Martin.
Yes.
Councilor Mendonça.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Thank you. Next, we have an ordinance to create a victim services advocate full-time grant-funded position, establishing the salary from between $36,581.85 through $42,866.54. Motion to waive the full reading by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Elliott. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed or voted. Reading by title. In City Council ordinance, an ordinance creating one victim services advocate full-time grant-funded position and establishing the salary in the police department. At this time, I'd open it up for a public hearing for those wishing to speak in favor.
Good evening, councilors. Basically, this position is, once again, the United States Justice Department of Justice has awarded us a grant and shown their competence in the Lowell Police Department in the city of Lowell. This position that we're talking about is going to be an advocate position working out of the police department alongside our family services unit, is to provide services and liaison services and referral services as well as follow-up to victims of domestic violence, and try to assist them through the process, through the courts and through the criminal justice system, and try to encourage victims of domestic violence to come forward and to continue with the efforts that the department's doing on their behalf. So, the police department would ask that you support this.
Thank you, Deputy Ryan. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? In favor? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? In opposition? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the council?
Move approval.
Move for approval by Councilor
Second.
Mercia, seconded by Councilor Laurie. Any discussion? Councilman Johnson.
Just know, I mean, it's in our packet, but for those listening at home, this position would only be created for as long as the grant exists.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Councilor Noon.
Just one quick question to the Deputy Chief. Is that this grant renewable? Deputy?
The grant that we're speaking about today is a 2-year grant. It actually began in October with the federal fiscal year, and we're in a process right now. Once it's approved, we'll go through a selection and hiring process, and it will go to October of 2014. At this point in time, we're hoping that the progress will be made. No decision at this point is whether or not we'd be able to qualify for additional grant funds or what have you, but we'll be able to reassess at that point.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Nunn.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Martin.
Yes.
Councilor Mendonça.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Thank you. Returning to the Councilor Elliott.
I want to see if we could suspend the rules and take Councilor Martin's motion up. There are some neighborhood leaders that are here, and I know they spend an inordinate amount of time at other meetings, so we could take up his motion.
I second that.
Motion to suspend the rules by Councilor Elliott, seconded by Councilor Noon, to take out of order. Motion by Councilor Martin. Request the City Council Public Safety Subcommittee meet monthly to address issues raised by citywide neighborhood groups and involve other subcommittees as necessary.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Again, Councilor Martin's motion. Request the City Council Public Safety Subcommittee meet monthly to address issues raised by citywide neighborhood groups and involve other subcommittees as necessary. Seconded by Councilor Elliott. Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I reported previously in the subcommittee report last week, I think we all got copies of a letter submitted by the citywide neighborhood group requesting the Public Safety Subcommittee meet monthly beginning in January on various issues of neighborhood concern related to public safety, but also sometimes crossing over into other matters within the jurisdiction of the council and other subcommittees, housing issues, code issues, zoning issues, and others. So the purpose of this motion really is just to formalize the process. As I said earlier, I spoke with the other members of the subcommittee, Councilor Elliott, Councilor Noon, both supportive of this approach. So we'll move forward, assuming the motion passes, and schedule a series of monthly meetings beginning in January.
Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Returning to the manager's portion of the agenda, we have a communication from the city manager. Request approval of out-of-state travel, 2 for the Lowell Police Department, 1 for the Department of Planning and Development, and 1 for the library. What's the wish of the council?
Motion to approve.
Move to approve, take them together.
Motion to approve and take together by Councilman Mendonça, second by Councilor Laurie. All those in favor of taking it together signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Motion to approve. Roll call, please.
Counsel Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Counsel Nun.
Yes.
Counsel Elliott.
Yes.
Counsel Kennedy. Counsel Leahy.
Yes.
Counsel Laurie. Counsel Martin.
Yes.
Counsel Mendoza.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Thank you. Next, Counsel Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if we couldn't suspend the rules too, just to go to the city manager's portion, number 11, the vote on the Underwood Property Management Development. Before that is the communication on the presentation of the draft of the master plan. And I know that the two individuals are here, and I know the Centerville neighborhood is here, and they also voted on that. So if we could just take that out of order and move it along.
Motion to suspend the rules by Counsel Laurie, seconded by Counsel Leahy, to take up item agenda number 11, a vote to accept the proposal of Underwood Property. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Vote to accept the proposal for Underwood Property Management and Development LLC at 39 Myrtle Street in Varnum School for $285,000. Motion to waive the full reading by Counsel Leahy, seconded by Counsel Kennedy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reading by title. And City Council vote. Authorizing the city manager to accept the proposal of Underwood Property Management and Development LLC in the amount of $285,000 to purchase property located at 39 Myrtle Street, a.k.a. the Varnum Elementary School, 115 6th Street, Lowell, and to execute all documents necessary for the transfer of the property. What's the wish of the council? Council Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we have two addresses to this property? Because I'm wondering, what is the proper address? Is it Myrtle Street or is it 6th Street? What do we have, two different addresses here?
Both the 39 Myrtle Street and 115 6th Street, correct?
Both?
Mr. Bakey?
I believe it's a single property, but it may have a different mailing address, or the school may have had a different mailing address from the official tax address, which is why it's identified with an AKA to encompass both. But it is the same.
But this property will only have one address when it's finalized, will it?
Yeah, presumably once it's developed, it will have a single address as in this case, an apartment building, provided the council supports this proposal.
All right. Mr. Mayor, I'd second the motion, but I'd also like to say that this is a very perfect example of how you're taking a non-taxable entity such as a school, and instead of it being vacant and left to rot and cause a neighborhood to devalue, someone is coming along through a 30B and highly advantageous and has chose to not only revitalize the building and revamp it, but to create housing as well. It has the endorsement of the Centerville Neighborhood Action Group, and it's amazing. So I wish we would see a little bit more of this, which is called new growth, in my opinion, tax base. Thank you.
Motion by Councilor Mercia to approve, second by Councilor Mendoza.
Right.
On the motion, Councilor Leahy.
Thank you. I just had a couple of quick questions. Before we, I'm assuming this will pass, when we transfer this property through you to the manager, Mr. Backey, what happens to a few years ago, we had a motion on the school side about the playground. So I'm just curious what happens with that, because at the time, I had made the motion to make use of the playground, and I got a few letters saying that it was donated, and, so we didn't have the right to move it. So I don't know where that went right now, but obviously we should make use of it and donate it somewhere if we could, if we get permission from the person that paid for it.
Yeah, I believe the proposer has expressed a willingness to work with the city on relocating it, but the city will need to identify an appropriate location to relocate it to.
I believe the school department knows the name of the person that donated.
Yeah, I believe the name is known.
Well,
I
they'd
don't
like
know it
that-
right now, but I do believe the name is known, so.
All right, because they were very concerned before, and I know that the kids in the neighborhood still use it, right? So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counsel Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Counsel Norton.
Yes.
Counsel Elliott.
Yes.
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy.
Yes.
Counsel Laurie.
Yes.
Counsel Martin.
Yes.
Counsel Mendoza.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Thank you. Returning to the regular agenda, we have communication from the city manager, presentation of the draft master plan. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will, at this point, as expected, turn this over to Mr. Bakey, but let me just say that the Department of Planning and Development, and I'll let Adam speak to the staff members that have been involved in this, but they've done an outstanding job over the course of the last several months and beyond, really, working on this master plan. And I think important to note is that this wasn't something that was done in a vacuum, just in the offices of DPD, that the city, through the actions of the DPD, reached out to the citizens of the city and asked them to participate in this process. And so the thanks goes certainly to the DPD staff, but beyond that, to the citizens that made such an effort in really participating in crafting the future of Lowell. And I wanted to thank them as well and turn it over to Mr. Bakey and recognize his work on this and in leading this effort and thank him for that.
Well, thank you, and good evening once again. And I realize that there's been a lot on the agenda tonight, and it's getting a bit late, so I will try to do the abbreviated version of this, and perhaps there'll be an opportunity that the entire plan is available on the city's website for folks to review, and there's an opportunity for them to submit their comments on this draft. And we also will be having some public meetings to present this draft to the public at large in more detail than we'll be able to do this evening, so there will be some additional opportunities. And we certainly look forward to everyone's input over the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks on this draft that will then get incorporated into a final plan to be presented later on. Before I start, I'd like to echo the manager's comments, really extending tremendous appreciation to this city staff that was involved in this project. The project was led by a steering committee that included Sandy Swale, Aaron Clausen, Maria Dickinson, Allison Lamy, Craig Thomas, and Joe Ginowitz. The document itself was prepared by a team including graphic designer Mike Moyle, our GIS specialist Joe Donovan from MIS, and Sandy Swale, and certainly the person who deserves a tremendous amount of credit for leading this effort and putting it together, being the principal author, designing and managing the entire public input process, and really doing yeoman's work to get us to this point, is our neighborhood planner Allegra Williams, who really is here with me this evening and is really the person who is really responsible for this. I get to stand up here and do the easy part. But I also want to echo the manager's thanks to the over 1,000 stakeholders in the community that participated in the process that Allegra designed and led. This is really, as he said, not the vision of a few planners in DPD. This is indeed the vision of a sizable percentage of the city that participated in this effort. And I believe they were scientifically selected to really be representative of the larger city as a whole. We also do want to give credit to the folks who participated in our sustainability snapshots photography contest. Their pictures are found throughout this document, and we really appreciate the creativity and talent that they all have. First, why would we be doing a master plan? I think there are two key reasons. You'll see a few on this slide, but the two key reasons. One is really to articulate the community's shared long-term vision so that that vision can guide a lot of the individual decisions that are going to get made over the next 5 to 10 or even longer years by individual land use boards or others that may impact the future development of the city. And it's important that they be made consistent with a long-term vision as opposed to on a more ad hoc basis. And secondly, nearly every time we go to write a grant seeking money from the state, the federal government, or private funders, they are very interested in how what we're asking them to contribute their money to fits into a larger vision and plan for the city. And the more we can articulate a clear and compelling vision and how their grant that we're asking them for fits into that, we have found that that has a tremendously positive effect on our chances of getting that kind of funding. The process itself, as we said, involved over 1,000 stakeholders through a number of different means to get us to this point, ranging from various public meetings to a nearly 1,000 households telephone survey to some really innovative tools using the web to engage people, engaging the youth of the community and engaging the sort of artists and creative photographers in the community and others to look at this issue and provide their input. The vision itself, which is probably in a font that no one here can read, is essentially one that I think has echoes in the debate that the council just had around the tax base and the tax rates. And I think some of the comments that were made about the quality of life and quality of place in the city being the real drivers for growth in the city, and ultimately that being what keeps taxes low and allows the city to continue to deliver good quality services, is exactly the vision of this plan. There is no question that the communities, particularly the urban communities that are going to be successful, the ones that are successful today and the ones that will be successful over the life of this plan, are the ones that are able to effectively embrace efforts to improve the overall quality of life in their communities, make them more livable and more attractive to both residents and businesses, and to trade upon their physical assets. One of the reasons people are interested in cities is because they are interesting places that have a particularly attractive character. In this case, it may be the historic district downtown, or it may be some of our neighborhoods. And we need to reinforce that positive character as what will be the deciding factor in attracting folks to here, as opposed to a less unique place, in some suburban area, sprawling area somewhere. This plan also puts a real focus on sustainability and looking at making sure that the choices the city is making today are beneficial to the long-term economic and environmental health of the city, as well as the social sustainability of the city. We divide the plan, which again, I will not go through every page of the plan, but you all have copies and it's available to the public on the website. But we divide it into a series of goals that reflect the content areas of the plan to flesh out that vision. The first of those goals is to reinforce the quality and the character of our neighborhoods and ensure that we have sustainable neighborhoods that are places people who have discretion will choose to live. And so we want to make sure that there is the right package of amenities and attractiveness to our neighborhoods. It is also important in our neighborhoods, but more broadly, that we provide for a broad range of housing options. One of the things that makes cities sort of tick economically is the interaction of diverse people among one another and the sort of spontaneous creativity and innovation that comes from that interaction, which is why it's incredibly critical that we continue to advocate for a vision that we, in the previous master plan, articulated as the lifetime city, where people at a broad range of income levels and backgrounds can find attractive and affordable to them housing for virtually any stage of life that they may choose or want to live in Lowell, as well as the amenities to support their lifestyle in addition to the housing. It's also obviously important to the vitality of a city that people have mobility and the ability to get around. Certainly a big piece of that is improving our roadways, improving our traffic situation, and so forth. However, in a predominantly built-out city where there is limited capacity to address traffic issues and traffic safety issues by just widening roads or increasing capacity, we have to also think about providing alternatives and multiple modes of transportation. We've seen a tremendous increase in the last few years around bicycling. There's some new public transportation opportunities in the city, and we certainly see as the university grows, they have embraced a plan which really focuses their transportation growth almost entirely around mass transit and biking. And I think that's the sort of thing that will allow the city to, within the limitations of our infrastructure, continue to grow economically, while also providing for reasonable traffic flow in the city and, of course, safety. I talked about how one of the sort of key overarching factors is the vibrancy and attractiveness of the physical place of the city itself. What goes on in the city as well as the place. And certainly our efforts to attract the arts to the city and bolster the arts, as well as a broad range of entertainment opportunities for folks, is what yields the kind of vibrancy and energy that again attracts people to an urban place. And that really applies to both people who want to choose to live, people who want to choose to visit, as well as, again, it is a key factor in people looking to make business location decisions, because they want to have the kind of environment that their employees can find an interesting lifestyle as opposed to a mundane one that they might find in an office park somewhere. All of which I think probably in some ways one of the most important goals within the entire plan is fostering a healthy and sustainable economy. Now, all of the other pieces certainly contribute to that. If we do not have safe neighborhoods, if we do not have quality housing opportunities and affordability, if we do not have transportation, we can't have a healthy economy. But if we also don't breed a culture that grows businesses from within and fosters innovation, fosters entrepreneurship, we will not necessarily have a sustainable economy. Lowell has twice in its history had benefited greatly from a sort of single industry economy during the boom periods. That was the textile industry and also the Wang years. However, we also realized a precipitous economic decline when that single industry began to decline in the city, and that is not a healthy and sustainable model. What we look to today is to try to foster the growth of a diverse blend of businesses in a diverse blend of industries, many of which are homegrown, because those are the businesses that are much more likely to stay in Lowell as they grow than the ones we bring into the city, but complemented by efforts to bring larger companies into the city as well. It's hard to have a sustainability without talking about the environment, because ultimately I think one of the things that communities all across the country and all across the world really are starting to recognize is the importance of addressing and being resilient in the face of significant environmental change that is facing everyone. And we certainly, I think Lowell has taken the lead in really being a model for an urban community to embrace sustainability, embrace energy efficiency, and so forth, to reduce costs, but also to reduce your impacts on the environment. And that's certainly something that I think is really critical, and certainly we heard loud and clear from the folks who participated in the public outreach that this is a really important priority for them as well. Of course, we as the city government, the master plan is a document for the community. It is also a document for the city government, and it is important that we maintain the most effective and efficient delivery of services and provision of infrastructure that we can for all of the parties that are involved in the city, whether those be residents or businesses. And finally, it's really important. I began by saying that this is a shared vision, and it was developed with a very inclusive process. It will necessarily be implemented by an inclusive process. We can make a choice to, as we are, to embrace that and really work to make sure that the community remains engaged as we implement the plan, or we can just sort of hope for the best and hope that everyone will implement along with us. But one way or another, the implementation of the growth and development of the community is not something that the city government does on its own in a vacuum, or even necessarily has the dominant role in. It is the product of numerous decisions that people across the city are making in their daily lives, in their businesses, and so forth. And what's really critical is that we work to ensure that folks are aware of the priorities that are articulated in the plan and are making those individual decisions in a manner that's consistent. If we do that, we will then start to see the community that we all want to see that's described in that shared vision. So I promised this would be brief, so I will get right away to what are the next steps. This is just a draft, and as I said at the outset, the purpose of this draft is to basically lay down what we believe we have heard from the community through the process, what we have found from the data analysis of existing conditions that we presented to you folks back in March, and how that translates into a series of very specific actions. There are numerous bullets in here that I'm sure you all are glad I didn't go through all of tonight. But we would certainly look for everyone who is interested to reach out and take a look, go to our website, download a copy of the plan, and please send us your copies, your comments on these, because what we want to do is make sure we've got it right before we make this the final plan, and we ask for the planning board and the city council to endorse it. What we are doing right now, we are presenting it to the planning board this month as well. We will hold 2 public presentations in January. On Monday the 7th, we will be at Cumnock Hall at UMass Lowell's North Campus from 6 to 8 p.m. That's to reach out to those neighborhoods north of the river. And then on Wednesday, January 9th, we will be reaching out to those neighborhoods south of the river with an event at the Lowell Senior Center from 6 to 8. So if anyone is interested in a little bit longer presentation than I have time to give this evening, and an opportunity to tell us what you think of the plan. We also will be, again, soliciting via the web comments from folks, and we will incorporate those comments that we receive as well. That will allow us to revise and update the plan, and the final version of the plan will also include significant sections translated into some of the other languages that are prevalent in the city, including Khmer, Spanish, and Portuguese. We will then prepare a final plan with those translations for the City Council and the Planning Board to adopt and endorse. Our goal is to have that by the end of the winter. And at that point, we will all take on the really hard work of implementing the plan. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have this evening, or we certainly look forward to your input and comments going forward as well. And obviously, Allegra is here if you have any questions for her also.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank through the managers to Adam and his team for an in-depth, comprehensive draft already in this master plans. One thing I want to ask is that maybe we, in a form probably motions, that is, I know that we want input from everyone. I urge that maybe we should also send a copy to all the school committee members and solicit input from them as well. That way, not just this body getting this report and getting input, giving input back to the DPD, but also the school committee members as well. So maybe this is in a form of motion at some point.
Motion by Councilor Noon, seconded by Councilman Donso. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Any discussion? Councilor Martin.
I just want to express some thanks at the work that's gone into this. I mean, this is a very impressive document. Obviously, there's a lot here to digest, but the first-rate quality of this for something in draft form is really well done, and I think it shows how seriously DPD and the council takes this effort. I think more important than the work product is the process gone through to get to this point, because you hate to see is big plans and visions and stuff put in a document and that it just sits on a shelf. But I think one of the ways to avoid that is to make sure that a lot of people are invested in the plan, and that's a lot of outreach. It takes more effort, but I think that's the process that's been gone through here. It's evident to me from the output. I like to kind of sit back and see what other people have to say about this without commenting too much myself. So I'd encourage people that are just learning about this for the first time, that's not too late, and there's plenty of opportunity to make your views known before we move ahead with adopting a final master plan. So thanks to the effort that's gone in so far, and encourage anybody who's interested to continue to participate.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Entertain a motion to accept and place on file by Council Kennedy, seconded by Council Laurie. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have an order for a 60-day trial Motion to waive the full reading by Council Mercia, second by Council Noon. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reading by title in City Council order pursuant to Chapter 266 of the Code of Ordinances, City of Lowell, Massachusetts, concerning Section 266-6, entitled Temporary Experimental Regulations. Temporary traffic regulations are implemented for a period of 60 days. What's the wish of the council?
Move approval.
Move for approval by Council Elliott, second by Council Kennedy. Roll call, please.
Council Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Council Nunn.
Yes.
Council Elliott.
Yes.
Council Kennedy.
Yes.
Council Leahy.
Yes.
Council Laurie.
Yes.
Council Martin.
Yes.
Council Mendoza.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Next, we have an ordinance to amend Chapter 104 for animals. Motion to waive the full reading by Council Mendoza, seconded by Council Martin. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. In City Council ordinance, an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, City of Lowell, Massachusetts, as amended with respect to Chapter 104 thereof, entitled Animals. Article 1, entitled Dogs, by striking out Chapter 104 Animals, Article 1, entitled Dogs in its entirety, and substituting a new Chapter 104, Article 1, due to substantive changes. Entertain a motion to refer to a public hearing on January 8th, 2012 at 7 p.m. So moved by Council Laurie, second by Council Kennedy. On the motion, Council Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know this goes to a public hearing. I'm not going to support this ordinance change. I believe that the bill that was enacted by the legislature was one of the most ill-conceived bills that they could have done. It was done at the 11th hour, and it completely obliterates the efforts that communities that have problems with pit bulls, all of the efforts, Boston, Lynn, Lowell, and there's a number of other communities. I don't support it. I'm not going to support this change. We spent hundreds of hours, months, I think it was years, actually adopting an ordinance. We worked with the Animal Advisory Committee, which included, by the way, representatives from MSPCA, to craft an ordinance, who, by the way, agreed that there was a problem with pit bulls in the city of Lowell. And I believe we came to terms. We adopted a fair ordinance that has been working. We just received a report in January regarding tickets, dogs confiscated, picked up, a number of dogs that have gone through the, and dog owners that have gone through the process of getting a certificate so their dogs wouldn't have to be muzzled. So the ordinance is working. And for this bill to be passed by some special interests that clearly don't understand the problems that cities face with pit bull ownership or irresponsible pit bull ownership, really it's wrong. It's unconscionable. We don't have a problem with poodles or shepherds or Labrador retrievers or Chihuahuas. We have a problem with pit bulls, and that's why we addressed it. So I understand, Mr. Mayor, that this has to go to a public hearing, but this is a step back. I think that we should challenge it, and I think it will be challenged at some point, but, to adopt it and to change the ordinance because of this bill, it really, the rights of the people in the city, where are their rights? We adopted it, and it seems to be working to protect the people that have been really attacked. And again, the pit bulls, their instincts are aggressive, they're strong, and they're different from other breeds. So that's why there is a problem, and it's not just Lowell. So I just wanted to say that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Any further discussion on referring to a public hearing on January 8th? Councilman Mendoza.
Well, the purpose of this is that the other ordinance has been struck down by the courts, is essentially unenforceable. So to protect our residents, our next best option is to have another ordinance that does define dangerous dogs, regardless of breeds, and has consequences if they don't behave as we expect.
Any further discussion? Councilor Elliott?
That's not true. The reason why this being changed is because the legislature adopted a bill, not because it's been challenged or struck down in courts. Is that correct, Madam Solicitor? I mean, it says it right in the ordinance because of the adoption of chapter, is it 193 of the Acts of 2012?
Right. The effect is the same. The legislature has enacted laws that essentially render not just our ordinance, but the ordinances of other municipalities as invalid and therefore unenforceable. And so the effort that was made was to work within the law and to bring before the council a new ordinance, and that ordinance would in fact comply with the law, be enforceable, and hopefully be as effective as it possibly could be.
Well, that wasn't his question, was it? Has this been challenged and rejected in a court of law?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that it's irrelevant because the statute that was essentially passed by the legislature, we don't need a court to step in and say that this can't be done because the legislature themselves has said in unequivocal and clear language that what we had passed and what other communities had passed in good faith has been overruled, preempted, if you will, by the state law, thus necessitating the change.
Okay, so the law that we put in place has not been challenged. It's just the legislature came in at the last minute with some special interest groups and passed a law. It's not been challenged to say it's not unconstitutional, or it has not been challenged in a court of law. That's all I was asking for, and you told me it hasn't.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have an ordinance to amend Chapter 140, Electrical Standards, and Chapter 150, in fees. Motion to waive the full reading by Councilman Donson, seconded by Councilor Martin. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Reading by title in City Council ordinance, an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Lowell, Massachusetts with respect to Chapter 140, thereof entitled Electrical Standards, and Chapter 150, thereof entitled Fees. Entertain a motion to refer to a public hearing on January 8th, 2012, again at 7 p.m. So moved by Councilman Donson, seconded by Councilor Lowry. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have a vote to accept Chapter 32B, Section 20. Motion to waive the full reading by Councilman Donson, seconded by Councilor Lowry. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Reading by title. In City Council vote. Accepting Section 20 of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 32B, as amended. Mr. Manager.
Mr. Mayor, this I know needs to go to a public hearing, and we would propose to do that on January 8th, but this is a pretty simple request. Increasingly, there's a new requirement out, or fairly new, it's 6-7 years ago now, that requires that we start to keep on our books the liability for our post-employment benefits, GASB 45. And this is something that actually has been picked up in management letters of municipalities and states across the country since the GASB was put in place. And here in Massachusetts, there are a number of communities have already moved in this direction. We'd like to see Lowell do the same, where we start to set aside money for this unfunded liability. You may recall that back in the 1980s, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts had a similar problem with its pensions, and really took a lead at that time that started to work on funding schedules for the unfunded liability that was out there for the Commonwealth as well as for the municipalities to address that rather than a pay-as-you-go basis. And I think in large part that has provided the Commonwealth and the municipalities with much more stability than you see in other states across the country that have pension systems and the like. The same applies now with post-employment benefits, health insurance for retirees, and particularly this is actually even more of a problem nationally because it affects every state where this is the case. Here in the city of Lowell, the unfunded liability that we're looking at last actuarial analysis was, I believe, $600 million. So it's a staggering sum that's going to come due, and we need to start planning for this for the future. Now, this isn't something that we're going to see the benefits of. Well, we'll see the benefits of certainly in terms of the financial community appreciating that we have recognized the problem and started to address it. But the real thanks will come from future generations of the city here, future residents, because this is something that's going to be necessary years out. But it's a step that needs to be taken for the financial stability of the city. Now, I will say, too, that it is, in all likelihood, going to become an issue that the state is going to be requiring communities to start to do. They haven't been able to grapple with this just yet. There is a special commission that's been formed. Municipalities are represented by an individual on this commission. The town administrator from Shrewsbury sits on that commission, but there are other people involved in that as well. But it is going to be a cost that ultimately is going to come due, and it is going to, by all accounts or by all opinions, something that communities are going to be required to do. So we'd like to get out in front of this. We see a golden opportunity with the cash out of our trust fund, and I know that Councilor Kennedy has a motion on, I believe, for later tonight to have the Finance Subcommittee discuss that, and we're happy to work with the Finance Subcommittee on that. But we think this is an opportunity to put some money aside, get the city on firm footing with regard to post-employment benefits, and really ensure that the future of the city is protected by utilizing this money in the most responsible and appropriate fashion. But the way to do that is to set up this fund that's now been established or enabled under Massachusetts general laws.
So, Mr. Manager, can you tell me what is our current annual cost? I understand the actuarial amount, the total from here on out, but what do we? Well, since we have adopted the new GIC plan, part of that agreement with our retirees was that first after 65 they're going to go on Medicare, right. But between that time, between 62 and 65, the city pays the MedX. Was it MedX that we adopted, or that plan?
They still, before they go on Medicare, they stay on the active plan.
Right, till 62?
I believe it's 65. They go to Medicare.
Okay.
So they would stay on the normal HMO, PPO, or indemnity plan, right, which are expensive plans.
Right.
And we would pay 75% of the cost. Then moving forward, they go on to the MedX type plan, the supplemental plan. And again, we pay 75% of that.
And what is that annual today? And I know, because based upon the report from Mr. Moses back in 2011, and there's some good information there. What is our annual cost right now, just for that supplemental portion?
I don't have that, and I don't think Mr. Moses has that.
What is it like? What is the premium? Is it like 4,000 premium, and the city pays?
I think it's low. I think it's lower than that.
Okay. I'm just trying to gauge. Look, I understand we have to set this up, something we
right.
agree on, because it is going to come due. I'm just curious, because we adopted, I think since this time, a health insurance design plan that will reduce our costs, right, and the pension liability is, according to the law, has to be funded out through 2030 now, right?
I think it's 2034.
So I'm just trying to gauge exactly what would go into this
fund. Council, that's a great question. And while I may not have exact numbers for you, and we'll get those, I think you're right on a number of points that you've made, and your comment regarding the unfunded liability of the pension, the full funding of the pension is important and significant as well. The move that the council took to adopt Section 18A was important because it required that all new retirees had to go on Medicare. By joining the GIC, de facto, or de jure, actually, we were required to go into Section 18, which required that all retirees that were eligible for Medicare had to go on that. It wasn't just new retirees, it was all retirees. There are still some retirees that are not eligible for Medicare because they don't have enough quarters in. So they stay on our active plans, and we pay 75% of the cost for those. But those two steps made an important change in our liability. The other important change was joining the GIC. That will have an effect once our next actuarial analysis is done. We think that this health insurance trust fund of several $million dollars, when it's all is said and done, and we don't really have the number right now, but we're working at getting that, will go a long way towards, will be a nice down payment, a sizable down payment on this liability. I don't know how much we'll be able to put in each year moving forward, but it would be nice if the city could do that, because it would smooth things out for the future, just as the full funding of the pensions did that. Then in 2034, which admittedly is 22 years away, chances are none of us will be here then. But 22 years from now, when that liability drops off, that becomes the spot at which some of that money could be then start to put into the post-employment benefit account as well. And that would ensure that the city is on a smooth path moving forward. Again, I'd like to see the city continue to put money into this moving forward, but obviously that's going to depend upon economic times. But the initial down payment into this account is where we think there's a real golden opportunity. But we'll get those numbers to be able to discuss that more definitively for the future.
Okay, good. I appreciate that. Because I guess point is, last week during the auditor's meeting, we learned that there was approximately 14 million in the health insurance trust fund, and of course we're drawing down against that, and there's about, I don't know, around 7 million left. I'm not holding anybody to any number, but around 7, and there's still bills that have to be paid out of that. I guess my question, Mr. Manager, now that after that is all settled, it'd be nice to know what our annual cost is for the medic supplemental, because that's really the bulk of our cost at this point, right? Moving forward.
It's a big chunk of our health insurance costs. It's less than the actives, because there's the Medicare portion that pays it.
Right.
But increasingly, it's an increasing portion of the health insurance costs. As more, and this is the issue that the OPEB and the GASB tried to pick up on, is that over time, when the decision was made to have retirees eligible for health insurance, it was seen as a low-cost item. Well, with the rising cost of health care and with people living longer, you can potentially have, particularly in your public safety departments, essentially 3 people on the health insurance in the same position. If you bear with me for a second. Someone gets on the force or in the employment of the city. They work 30 years. They retire at 55, let's say. They retire and they live another 30, 40 years. In the meantime, someone else has come on, worked 30 years, now they're retired and eligible for health insurance, and you now have a 3rd employee in that same slot, all getting health insurance from the city. So increasingly, it's becoming a bigger and bigger portion of our overall health insurance budget. And that's what GASB and the OPEB conditions tried to point out. I know there was a meeting last night in Andover. One of the people there was talking to me this past week about one of the selectmen about some of their costs and what they're looking at and trying to do. So it's a problem that isn't unique to Lowell. The Lowell Sun has written about this. It's a major issue moving forward for communities.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? I'd entertain a motion to refer to a public hearing also on January 8th, 2012 at 7 p.m. So moved by Councilor Lowry, seconded by Councilor Leahy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next we have reports. Subcommittee report of the Finance Subcommittee for December 4th. Councilor Mendonça.
Yes, the Finance Subcommittee met earlier this evening. Present were myself and members, Councilor Elliott, Councilor Martin. Also present were Councilor Mercier, Councilor Noon, Mayor Murphy, and Councilor Lowry. And of course, from the administration, we had Manager Lynch, Mr. Moses, and Ms. Wright, our auditor. We did meet to discuss the free cash and its utilization. We started with a presentation by the manager, who gave us a history of the free cash and excess levy capacity over the years and how we come to the situation we're in now. In addition to a presentation of the different ways we could utilize the cash, from having applied to a portion of it to the tax levy, to putting it in stabilization, to using it to capital improvements. So I provide us with 4 different scenarios that could be applied and pros and cons of each. There was a motion by Councilor Elliott to apply $1 million of the free cash to the tax levy, but that was defeated 1 to 2. There was then a motion by Councilor Martin that we accept the recommendation of the manager and apply the free cash to the stabilization fund with potential uses in the future for capital improvements, as he would then recommend beyond that. And that motion was the recommendation of the subcommittee. It passed 2 to 1. And that's essentially what transpired at the meeting, and that's a report of progress. I don't know if any of the other members of the subcommittee wish to add to the report, or other councilors that were present have comments to make.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything to add to the report. I would move we adopt the recommendation of the subcommittee.
Motion by Councilor Martin to adopt the recommendation, seconded by Councilor Lowry. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor Mercier.
Well, I know that if we leave it at free cash, it gets no interest and nothing. So we do transfer it into the stabilization account. It generates interest. We can use it. It's flexible. We can do what we feel we have to do with it. However, the motion more or less says to me that we're putting it into the stabilization account to build our reserves. And I can understand that as well, but the fact remains, we're not saying what we want to be done with it. So to leave the motion as it is just passing it in there. I like to have a say on where that money is going. And I know that Councilor Elliott made a motion in the subcommittee meeting and it failed. But I think the fact remains that there's things that I like to see prioritized, and it's nice to just be able to salt it away. But I'd like to first give some money back to the taxpayers. I feel that they're deserving of it. It's their money. I'm not saying to give it all to them, although I wish, as you want to put it all in the stabilization account, I'd like to give it all back to the taxpayers. And as you said, we have a responsibility to do the right thing, and I think the right thing is to give them back some portion of it. And I also feel that extensive work is needed with infrastructure improvements. There's no doubt about that. I want to have a say that, yes, if anyone were going and walking through neighborhoods, you would hear the first thing that they don't ask for much, but they do ask for improved sidewalks, streets, the wear and tear that their vehicles make it on the roadway is very important to them. I understand that. And I'd like to leave a little in there as well to stabilize the tax rate for next year. I know that you did do an extensive review in your office on the way in to see to do the auditor Cheryl Wright's city council meeting when we were meeting the last of the month with Cheryl, and you brought us, I asked you some questions, you did the whole outline, and it made a lot of sense, and I appreciate that. However, I feel that we as a council, we have a right to make our recommendation as well, and I don't know if my colleagues all have the votes to support that, but I would like to see three things: a portion returned to the taxpayer, because it's not what I say. I did receive a few requests as well. We did get an email from a gentleman that said the things that I'm saying and bringing his messages up, but we did take $87,000 and transfer it over, or appropriate it to give to the overtime for the police. I think that might make a dent. Maybe we won't even have to borrow any I want a zero tax base. I want it zero. I want some infrastructure. I want some money committed to that. And I want to save some for next year's tax rate as well. Those are the three things that I'm requesting. So to say blatantly, simply to transfer it over all into the stabilization account, that's all well and good, and I believe that, with the stipulation that we use the money for the three areas that I suggested. So although Councilor Martin is making his motion, I like to substitute it and say whatever that money is, if people agree with me, that those three areas need to be looked at.
Mr. Mercia?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Elliott. Mr. Manager?
Councilor, I think that I understand exactly what you're saying, and I think we're in agreement. We are going to have a 0% increase this year. Our proposal is to use the money for capital in terms of having it in that account, but expediting the borrowing that we do under the capital plan. Instead of borrowing $5 million next year, we're proposing to borrow $12 million next year, because then we'll have that stabilization fund not to spend next year, but to have on hand so that if there is a dip in certain years, that we're able to fill that with taking money out of the stabilization fund to fill that gap, so that we're able to afford that debt service for that large capital expenditure. It's also our plan, as I said in our presentation, to have a 0% increase next year. So we're addressing this year, next year, capital, and by having it in the reserve fund, we'll have it on hand to, in the event that there is a decrease in local aid, if there is bad economy that results in other drop-off in revenue, or other costs arise. So we're put ourselves in a very good position by having that savings account. Just like anyone would with their household, they would have that cash on hand for emergencies. They would be able to make improvements to their home through a borrowing process, and at the same time meet that goal of holding the line on taxes this year and next year. I do appreciate that Councilor Mendonça, in making his summary of the meeting, raised the issue that of the historical look. I think it's I know it's sort of beating a drum here, that, and some people may get tired of my doing it, but I heard it tonight a couple more times, that since 2006 taxes have gone up. Well, the numbers that I've provided you speak for themselves, that it was prior to 2006 that the city went through a substantial amount of reserves, 17 million. We decreased reserves to nothing, and we increased taxes during that period of time by decreasing the excess levy capacity. We didn't use the free cash that we had back then to hold in reserves. We didn't use the free cash back then to reduce taxes. We increased taxes above 2.5% each and every one of those years. We're now in a position, and the citizens of the city, I think, should be very pleased that we're in a position that we have reserves and we have a greater gap in our taxation. We stopped the tide of the city council and the administration, stopped the tide of decreasing the levy, excess levy capacity. And I think that's significant. At the same time, I've also heard that there hasn't been any money spent on capital. And as I point out in our presentation, over the last 6 years, we've spent $154 million on our infrastructure. That's pretty sizable. But there's much more that needs to be done. Much, much more. And our proposal that we presented to the subcommittee maintains the low taxes, maintains spending money on infrastructure, and maintains reserves that's there. So I think we're in agreement on how we, but it's just, we think it should go into the stabilization fund so that it's there and that we can get at next year if we need it for taxes, and we can have it there in the event that we have a dip when we borrow that money, and that we have it there in the event that there's an economic downturn.
And Mr. Manager, I agree it should be transferred into the stabilization account, no doubt about that, with the understanding that these 3 areas are met. And I just want it in writing. I don't want to blatantly say, gee, let's put it in a bank account. I want to put it in a bank account for A, B, and C.
Absolutely.
That's what I want. Thank you.
Councilor Noon and then Councilor Laurie.
Thank you. I will support the move this money to the stabilization fund because I know that we can always use it, especially for next year's in the events that the local aid cut. And of course, there's a capital improvement that we need to do quite a bit of in the city, street, lighting, and so on and so forth. So that money we can always go get it from the reserve fund. That is to put it there, and hopefully again next year like this year that we will not increase taxes. Tax will be zero, increase, and that's the aim of the council. It's a good thing that we have reserve, we have free cash, and we should put it in the places where we can always go back and get it in the tough times. So I'll support it. Thank you.
Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support putting the money in the account. I know a week or so ago, when the announcement was first made, Lowell called me and said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, infrastructure would be my first choice with the money left over going into the account. But having said that, and I talked to the manager a little bit about this, right now, there's a lot of money out there you can lend really at low cost. If we put the money in the account and we borrow on that, instead of spending $2 million on the infrastructure, we can spend $10 to $12 million. Councilor Kennedy made a statement earlier, which is true. To stabilize the tax base, you got to have growth and industrial growth. A couple of weeks ago, I was out at the MBTA station. We were talking about the Tanner Street initiative. Now, the state is in somewhat some trouble. They don't know what their future is. The government's in trouble. They don't know what their future is. We have an opportunity here to stabilize the city and do some work around the city. If need be, we could tap into that account to finish off the Tanner Street initiative or lend on it. That's a big parcel of land out there, will go a long way. And if anyone who, I don't know if the other councilors saw the plan, it involves the connector, the Tanner Street area, the land off Maple Street. So, and we all get calls. A couple of weeks ago, I got a call, C Street needs to be repaved, and they were wondering why, while the streets around it, well, that was Chapter 90 money. I went out and talked to the constituent. We went out to the sewer. You could see right through it. I called Henry, and the sewer got fixed. But we have sidewalks where people in wheelchairs can't go down, or those carts. And so I'm going to support putting it into a fund. If we need to bond money, at least instead of doing $2 million improvements, we'll do 10, 12. And if the need be, the state can't give us money, or the government down the line, the money will be there for future use. You know, and I thought about giving the taxpayers some back money, $1 million, $1.5 million, and that might drop the tax rate $10, $15, $30. What good is it if next year we're going up 40? We just talked about an account that we have to set up now for future use by the retirees on health insurance and retirement. So this is really a balance, and I think trying to get the work done as cheaply as possible and using the money in that account and stabilizing the tax rate over the next couple of years, to me. And I've heard that, to try to stabilize it from different people. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to support putting the money in, but I'd like to see as Councilor Mercia said, and I said it in the paper, I'd like to see the infrastructure done, but if I can get 12 million instead of 2, I'll take it. And that will go a long way in helping the city, but also stabilizing the tax rate for the next year or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'm just a little, as you recall, I'm the one that made the motion to send it to the Finance Committee, and I'm just a little bit surprised at the speed at which the subcommittee acted on this. And I guess the only reason that I can think of to act on it with such speed is if the money was going to be used to reduce the tax levy, which I don't think is necessarily the best use of the money, but I think that by the action that the subcommittee is taken tonight, if it's endorsed by the City Council, that would be off the table. What would remain on the table are the other two options. So the other two options, as I see it, one is to save the money for next year, or to save it and use a portion of it for capital improvements. The reason that I'm surprised that the Finance Committee subcommittee came back so quickly is that I think that if you're going to take a serious look at some capital improvements, then you kind of have to earmark or target where those capital improvements would be. And for instance, there's work that needs to be done out at the stadium. I think many of us are aware that there's a lot of work to be done in the schools. There's a whole host of things that need to be done. And a lot of them are one-time things. And this money is a one-time thing. So, so that's something that could be done. I think just to just send it into a stabilization fund is fine, but I'm not sure that, I guess I just had envisioned that there'd be a little bit more in the way of targeting the money towards capital projects and saying, like, this is something that's been hanging for a long time. We haven't had the money to do it. Now we have the money, so let's attack this, because maybe next year the money won't be there. And so we can't do that at that time. Now, I realize, and I would imagine the city manager is going to respond and say, well, by being in the stabilization fund, we can do that. And there's some truth to that, but we'll wait and see what ends up happening to the money.
Councilman Donza.
Yes, being the chair of the subcommittee, I felt there was some urgency to it, because they have to know where this money is going to sit in order to set the tax rate, whether any of it's applied towards the tax levy or just a stabilization. And that has to be done in probably the next couple of weeks in order for us to be able to send out bills for the third quarter on time. So that was the urgency I felt. So I thought it was important to get this done as soon as possible. Now, as far as the motion before us, we certainly need to put it someplace. All appropriations have to come from the manager. So we're only making a recommendation at this point. Now, I've heard the manager say that he supports doing one-time capital improvements to some extent. And so I'm using that as an indication that we are going to get our priorities of having some spending on capital improvements, which I think, as I listen to residents, they don't want their taxes to go up, but they want their streets paved, they want sidewalks improved, they want the traffic congestion lessened. And so whatever we can do to do that, to address that, or to ameliorate the problem, we should do. But what I'm hearing is if we put it into stabilization, then the manager can send the data down and get the tax rates set, and then in the future weeks, come back with recommendations on how we can accelerate some capital expending to get some of those improvements done. And if the manager would like to comment further, through the mayor.
Mr. Manager.
That's it exactly. I was going to comment, and I don't really need to now, because the point, Council, you made at the end regarding the expediting. It is an expedition too, but expediting the capital is our goal. And so that instead of just doing, as Councilor Laurie pointed out, a few $1 million, let's do 12. We know that money will be there. It will be in that stabilization fund. And then we can move forward with all of that capital that we so desperately need. The stadium being one, school improvements being another. Roads desperately need work. And we're able to do that and get roads accepted, get some of the traffic signals replaced. There's so much work out there that needs to be done. But we'll be able to do that because we'll leverage this $6.4 million to allow us to borrow a larger amount of money over the next couple of years to get all of that work done, knowing that when you look at the forecast and you put that debt service in, there's going to be years that it's going to drop into the negative. So those years, you're able to take the money out of that stabilization fund. And, you know, I'll be honest, I think we should be able to, in the future, continue to put that in. It's just managing our resources in a way that we can leverage it to get the most bang for our buck while still maintaining a lower taxes than other communities and holding the line on taxes. So, but you use that money to leverage that in that way. So the steps that will be taken now, you know, the Finance Subcommittee met tonight. They, you know, we met with, the administration met with them. There is obviously, it was an endorsement of the strategy that we're proposing. We will come back at as early as next week with a proposal. I almost put it on for this week, but to transfer the money into the stabilization fund. Then in January and February, we will be taking the capital budget that was put together, as well as some new items that have been proposed, working them into a new capital plan, and I actually would like to see us come in with that capital budget in the late winter, early spring, as opposed to waiting until when the budget is approved, like we did this past year, and you know, come in with a plan to spend $12 million that we would then go out and start the work on this summer during this construction season. That's the flaw that, you know, of waiting too long, is you miss this construction season. If we could start to get the money out there, we could do work in the schools this summer as opposed to waiting until the following summer. So yes, it hits the capital, yes, it hits the reserves, and yes, it provides us with the resources to then hold the line on taxes moving forward.
Any further discussion on the motion? Councilor Leahy.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that, you know, I think this is the best of both worlds here. We're holding the tax down to zero, so people are benefiting from that over the next 2 years. We're going to invest in our roads and our infrastructure. We're going to do these projects like the stadium. So we're actually generating more money. Our values are going up in the homes. Hopefully we're going to regenerate some business out at Colley Stadium. I mean, think of the events we could have there. all these events can bring money into the city. Streets are long overdue, and you've said that, and that's very important. And, people are gonna benefit from this. Everybody's gonna get something. Taxes aren't going up, streets and infrastructure are being improved on, and the schools are being fixed up. So everybody gains from this. So I'm excited about it. I hope, can't wait to see the plan that comes out. And I think that the good recommendation from the Finance Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Again, the motion is to recommend to the city manager that we move the free cash to a stabilization account for a number of various council goals.
Point of information.
Council Elliott.
I thought Council Mercier made a substitute.
Yeah,
She
he's
did.
reiterating it in 3 areas.
You
that way.
correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's
on
what,
the.
that's what we're doing. Yeah, he said that.
So is this the original motion from the Finance Subcommittee?
No,
How could
no,
that
it's
be
the substitute motion that I
Substitute motion
said.
by
What is
Council
it?
Mercier.
Could you repeat it?
The motion, as I understood it, the motion was to recommend to the city manager that we move the free cash to a stabilization account for the purpose of satisfying a number of different council goals, including,
Zero tax.
zero tax increases, capital improvements, and
Infrastructure, and devote some to next year's tax rate so that we can be zero-based next year as well. That's what I wanted.
So your intent is not to reduce taxes, it's just the Finance Subcommittee's recommendation of taking all the money and putting it into the...
Yes.
it's very similar.
Slated for these specific things.
Council Mercier just wanted to clarify what the motion was coming out of the committee and for what, goals. So that's the motion on the floor. If there's any further discussion, we can entertain that. Otherwise, we take a roll call. Council Elliott.
Well, I don't know if is that a substitute or an amendment, because, I still want to put forward, if you're substituting, you have to change the nature of the motion, correct? That's what it's substituting, it's changing the intent of the original motion.
Well, I think her intent was
So I like a ruling, it's either a substitute or it's not, or it would be an amendment.
Council Mercier,
Oh.
what do you?
Well, I'm
I
asking you...
substituted this motion that the subcommittee made a recommendation on and said that I do support transferring all this money into the stabilization account, but I wanted it to state specifically 3 areas, and that's the substitute motion. I didn't put a price tag on it, I just said, because we could shove it all in there, transfer it all in there, and not say anything about where do you want it to be, what purpose do you want to use it for, and I just specifically clarified what 3 areas of improvement I want, and it's a substitute motion to support it or not, and that's what the roll call is right now.
I like to present an amendment to that substitute because that we reduce the levy by $1 million. There's $9 million in reserves right now, and if we take $1 million and put the other 5.4 into the reserve, that'll leave 14 million plus in those reserves. Give people a tax break of $1 million and still have plenty of reserves left.
Well, that again would be a substitute motion to Council Mercier's, which isn't actually allowed.
Well, that's why I was asking, because a substitute changes the intent of the original motion, and that substitute is not changing the intent of the original motion.
Well, I think it was substantively different than what Councilman Donser had put forward, and that therefore was a substitute motion, and that, what you're presenting is essentially another substitute motion, which is not allowed.
Well, it would be an amendment, because I'm amending the 6.4 to 5.4.
Amendment by Councilor Elliott, seconded by Councilor Kennedy. Roll call on the amendment. On the amendment, Councilor Kennedy.
To the Finance Committee, it was right after Council Elliott had made a motion to use some of it for the tax levy. I'm not absolutely opposed to doing that, but I think that it should be done if it's going to be done, it should be done in a thoughtful way. And so I would not be in favor of just taking $1 million without knowing what the impact is going to be or what good we're going to do for taxpayers by doing that. And without doing that, I can't support the amendment to the motion. But I guess I would think that that should be part of the debate that should go on about this money.
Roll call on the amendment, please.
Councilor Mercia.
No.
Mayor Murphy.
No.
Councilor Nguyen.
No.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
No.
Councilor Leahy.
No.
Councilor Laurie.
No.
Councilor Martin.
No.
Councilor Madonza.
No.
1 yea, 8 nays.
Amendment fails. We revert back to the substitute motion by Councilor Mercia, again to transfer the free cash to the stabilization funds. That's what our recommendation is to the
Specific
city managers
purposes.
for a number of different goals of the city council. Roll call, please.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Nguyen. Yes. Councilor Elliott.
Present.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Martin.
Yes.
Councilor Madonza.
Yes.
8 yeas, 1 present.
Any further discussion on the finance subcommittee? Anyone else with announcements of subcommittee meetings? In that case, we'll move on to the general petitions. There's one claim for property damage. Entertain a motion to refer to the law department for a report and recommendation by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Martin. Councilor Mercia.
I don't know if this is the proper time to say this, but and if it isn't, I could make a motion next week about it, but we do have the packet online. And I don't mind everything being online, but I do kind of object to the law department claims being put online when I think I would exclude the claims because you're giving someone's social security number, their address, I don't think that's something that I really want to share with the public. I think it's something we want to share here, but a lot of and I don't even mind talking about it, but their social security numbers going out there, their address, personal information, I don't know that I want to, I'd like if the solicitor wants to weigh in.
I couldn't
Madam
agree more.
Solicitor.
I couldn't agree more.
So I would like to suspend the rules, Mr. Mayor, and make a motion to exclude the claims from the online, the packet online.
Madam Solicitor.
Just the claims.
I would just add that there are some claims that, and information that, all of it is public anyway, but there is some information that could be transmitted in the normal way. The information that becomes troubling to see is information on accident reports and things like that, which does contain much more detailed information.
Yeah, too much information.
Councilor Noon.
The other way we could do is that redact information, the name and address of the individual. That way the report come in, but no name, no address, no social security numbers and whatnot, John Doe, whatever. And that's the way probably you can do that.
Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would suggest anything from the law department we would keep out of the packet. A couple of weeks ago, and I'm just on the council now 10 months, we were in executive session to talk about suits against the city. Now, anything that goes into that packet, and some of it may be public information, could be used by a party to hamper, in my opinion, a city's position on a claim or a defense that we have. So I would say, I wouldn't put anything in the packet from the law department at all. Thank you.
So that's in the form of a motion?
Council Mercia, to get a recommendation from the law department on what should and shouldn't be included in the packet. Does that make sense?
Yes. I actually wanted to make the motion to exclude stuff from the law department in the packet, online packet.
And it seems the solicitor is amenable to that, so.
Right, I think she just answered the question.
Right. So motion by Councilor Mercia, second by Councilor Noon. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. The motion that we have before us is to refer to the law department for report and recommendation. So moved by Councilor Mercia, second by Councilor Noon. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next we
Excuse
have
me. Just
Councilor Leahy.
one question on this. Is there a timeline, because this is almost a year old,
Timeline.
on putting in a claim for an accident?
Madam Solicitor.
Right, depending on the nature of the claim, there are time limits for Chapter 84 claims as well as 258 claims. And in fact, oftentimes, well, that's one of the things that we always will look at. So if somebody is over the statutory time limit, they will receive a denial letter, and that happens frequently. That's a good question.
Any further discussion? Next, we move to motions. First motion of the night, Councilor Mercia, request the city manager and city council publicly recognize the outstanding contribution to life by Shannon Gouveia. Seconded by Councilor Noon. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't reiterate everything that I want to say, but I know that this council supported a very important donor ordinance some time ago. Councilor Marty Laurie and yourself, Mr. Mayor, and it stipulated that anybody that would donate an organ would have some time off. And I thought to myself, that's remarkable. I don't know if that's even going to happen, but if it does, I so wholeheartedly support it. And lo and behold, right here under our roof, someone has donated a kidney, and that is Shannon Dinsmore Gouveia. I am so proud of her, and I did talk to the city clerk and said if this should pass, and if it does, I would like her to come up next week, December 11th, and be recognized with a proper citation, and so that we can present her to the public. I just think this is a person that did a heroic, courageous deed, and I think it should not go unrecognized. I just wanted to say that. I'll reiterate more next week if it passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next motion by Councilor Mercia. Request the city manager have proper department instruct eating establishments to post signs requesting the presence of any food allergies for customers. Seconded by Councilor Mendonça. Councilor Mercia.
I kind of pay attention to this because my daughter is highly allergic to shellfish, but that's not why I made this motion. I did get a call from a constituent who said that a niece went into a restaurant with her aunt, and the aunt wasn't thinking about the fact that the child had a food allergy. Had she seen a sign, it would have dawned on her, ooh, I gotta be careful. But the fact remains that it is a law already in effect. But the fact is, you don't see them posted very often, and that's what I want. Adam Bakey informs me that it's a state law, and it's one of the requirements for restaurants to get a permit is that they display the sign. However, I don't see them readily available in the public view, and if it was that case, this aunt might have been alerted by that sign and said, oh my goodness, she has a food allergy. And there was an incident that happened with that. I won't get into it, but that's why she called and asked if I would make sure through the health department or someone that the restaurants have a sign posted, And I don't know where they're posting them. Where are they posting them? In the kitchen? Because I don't never see them when I go into the restaurants myself. And I would notice it because my daughter has an allergy. But this is a child that didn't think to tell the aunt that I have an allergy. But the aunt would have known and remembered it had she seen the sign. That's the gist of that motion. Thank you.
Mr. Manager.
Counselor, I believe that is, Adam and I talked about this yesterday, actually, and it is a law that there has to be something of that posted, we believe. But what we can do is we can have the Board of Health reiterate that they need to do that. And I believe the licenses, the annual common victual licenses are going out as we speak. It may be something to add into the those for those license holders that have those common victual licenses.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next motion by Councilor Mercier, request the City Council support the motion to restore council names in all citations in important papers with the exceptions of proclamations. Seconded by Councilor Noon. Councilor Mercier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the motion does speak for itself, but some say that I could have called you and avoided making this molehill into a mountain, but my thoughts referred back to the beautiful gift of Pericles, the Athenian Greek leader that was anchored on the mantle facing our American leader, George Washington, and how long it took to be put back in its rightful place by a mere phone call. So I wanted to go on record that I will not wait as long as the people of Greek heritage did. I admire the fact that you're both aides, Greg Page and Jen Myers, are willing to fall on the sword for you, but the oversight rests with the department head, and that is you, Mr. Mayor. When you signed those many citations, did you not wonder that something was missing, or was it strictly a mayoral thing? And maybe it didn't seem significant that we were on the same paper. I don't know, but I wish that, as the words of my fellow former mayor, Armin Mercier, says many times, I am a part of a team. And I wish that that was true here, but apparently sometimes you do things quite solo, as quite was apparent when you forget sometimes to mention the council entirely, and the manager's breakfast comes to mind. As far as one of the example citations from my term as mayor, which was submitted to you along with 3 others as an example of how citations should be set up, that one from me was given to me by my staff on my birthday, and it's the only available citation that I ever had. They thought enough of me, not only as their supervisor, but as their friend. Unlike some of your friends who went on the blog that I heard, they didn't find that that was unusual and that it was wrong. But I thought that what my staff did for me was very thoughtful. And let me state that this council, we are a team. And there is no I in team. The public elected 9 members of this body as a whole. You, Mr. Mayor, were appointed by us, not the public. And lastly, if other councilors never complained about this before, why now? I just got these citations and realized the oversight. I respect this body too much for any of them to be slighted, and I think it's an injustice, and I won't tolerate that. That's why I spoke up. And I understand that you will restore our names back on there. There's no need to go out to bid or go out to printing. As what I can remember back in January, from what I heard, LZ Nunn and Adam Bakey and the manager put the logo of Alive, Unique, and Inspiring on the city's papers, and it was submitted through the computer, and it comes out printed already like that. You can get into the computer and you can change the 3 new city councilors that were elected, and then John Leahy, Councilor Leahy is the newest member. You can go back into the computer and change it and put his name in there. This is a body of the whole, and I was taken aback when I saw not that I didn't appreciate them, I certainly did, but this is a body of the whole. This is official paper. It's about this body, and it isn't just about you. And I'm sorry to say this publicly, but I felt if I was taken off without any warning, I wasn't wanting you either. So that's why I just said that.
Any further discussion on the motion? Just very briefly, it was not intended as a slight, and I won't respond to the rest of what I think was.
Then may I ask a question?
But the issue has been addressed.
Are you putting our names back on the citations?
Actually, one has already been written for Shannon at your request, and it has all the names of every counselor.
Then mission accomplished. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next motion by Councilor Laurie, request the city manager have proper department develop a social and economic impact statement of the city and present to courts and judges during the penalty, bail, and judgment considerations. Seconded by Councilor Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion comes from actually a couple of areas. We had some problems over the past couple of months. I would go to the neighborhood meetings, and one of the excuses, well, the judges just let people go. And a couple of weeks ago, Councilor Martin had the Public Safety Subcommittee, and I was listening to the one of the prosecutors talk, saying that they have to educate the judges. Well, I'd like to have actually probably 2 departments, the police department and law department, come up with an impact statement to represent the city when judges are considering bails or penalties. The police department, if you go to any neighborhood meeting, they have all the statistics, the crimes, and I think hopefully they could come up with something, what impact it has on the city. And I have all the faith in the law department too, that possibly they could come up with a statement to present to the police department to give to the prosecutors at the time of bail or penalty when the judge is taking into consideration the impact it has on the city. I look back at, and I've said this before, the 10 Johns or so who were arrested and just released with about a $125 penalty. Well, you know, prostitution is probably back on that street. You can't send your kid to the store at 6 o'clock at night. People can't walk with their spouse. And this is the impact these things have on the city. And I just, if the city, if it's possible that we can have an impact statement by the city to present with the police to the judges on what their judgment will be if they let someone out on bail or they give out light penalties. Thank you.
Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Being after 10 o'clock, we need a vote to continue. So moved by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Leahy.
Roll call on that.
Roll call, please.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Nunn.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
No.
Councilor Kennedy.
No.
Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Martin.
No.
Defeated. 2 noes, killless.
Okay. Councilor Mendoza.
Yes.
Therefore, entertain a motion to adjourn by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Mendoza. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, we stand adjourned.